Hello, friends. Welcome to Coding Garden. It's been way too long. It's good to see you all. I'm happy to see all of your names in the chat. And today we're going to answer some code questions. So if you have a question in the chat, you can do !ask followed by your question, and then it will show up on this website. And thank you, Acid Spark. Thank you for that sub. So I see. You're 39 months, almost about to have a midlife crisis. I get it. That's great. Wait, and thank you, the She-Boss, for the gift. But yeah, if you do !ask, your question will show up here. I won't lose it. I will do my best to answer it. Oh, and thank you, Scooz News. Welcome in. Do I have an actual garden? I do. I do. My wife maintains it, though. Well, and I guess in the U.S., a garden typically is for like flowers and fruits and vegetables. I know like in the UK they call their yard a garden. I have two very big yards, like my front yard and my backyard, but yeah. But our garden has peppers, tomatoes, strawberries, raspberries, and lavender right now. That's all we got. Okay, but yeah, so we're gonna get warmed up. Welcome everybody in. !ask. It'll show up here. We won't lose it. Let's say hi to everyone really quick. And then I'll do a Code Wars code kata just to get warmed up, because honestly, I think it's been weeks since I've even written code. So got to get back into it. But if you would like to say hi to me, or if you'd like me to say hi to you, you can say hi, hello, hey, yo, cheers, greetings, hi, what's up, morning, afternoon, evening, howdy, good day. Coding Hayo, Vohayo, or Bogahe. Say any one of those things. I'll do my best to acknowledge you. We're going to go back in time to 15 minutes ago when Zelino was the first to say hello. Welcome in, Zelino. What's up, Mark and Nevetskar and Limotes and Rugmat, and hello, Lakshman. Yeah, I thought pixelation would be interesting. it's this, because this is my studio. But, you know, I can see how some of you might have thought that that the stream just had a bad bit rate. What's up, May and Stas? Good to see you. Bukari Dev, what's up? Hello, Prasanth and Hasmola and Nightcoder and It's by Thriel and Default and Galloping Tapeworm. What's up, Diamond and Webneat? Welcome in, everybody. Glad to see you. Yeah, let's jump right into it. Let's just do a Code Wars code kata. And Winter Not Found. Welcome in. Good to see you. And if you don't want to watch me solve a code kata, go over to my YouTube and watch my latest video. I had fun making it and editing it, and I'd appreciate it if you gave it a watch. So go check it out. Let's write some code. And talk to you. Welcome in. Right now, so here's the thing. Code Wars is kind of broken for me. They're going through like a UI change. But watch what happens. First of all, the URL says beta false, but if I go in and I choose any one of these filters, the rest of the filters disappear. The rest of, and then I can't like filter by yeah, there's clear the browser cache. Maybe that'll help. Let me do that really quick. Well, I guess if I do a hard reload. So, like, they pop back up, but let's see. Like, if I choose a thing... Okay, they seem to stick around now. And I want, like, katas I have not trained on. No, see, they disappear. Shut down the computer? No. Regardless, I figured out what the query parameters needed to be, and I just put them in manually. I'm going to solve a 6Q. 6Qs aren't, like, super difficult, but it's going to take me maybe, like, 10 or so minutes to solve it. And Lakshman, thank you for the bits. Who says, you should change the minimum number of bits to 8 so that we will be sending you bytes instead of bits. That's hilarious. That's really funny. And this kata has something to do with bytes, so very, very relevant. Okay, a stream of data is received and needs to be reversed. Each segment is 8 bits long, meaning the order of these segments needs to be reversed. For example, boom, 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 boom should become boom, 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 boom. Okay, a total number of bits will always be a multiple of 8. The data is given in an array. I can do this. Basically, we need to split it into chunks of 8 and then reverse the whole thing. Let's do it like fast, really fast. So data is going to be an array, and we need to split it into chunks of 8. So we are actually just we're going to do a loop. And we're going to have chunks, which is an array that we'll push into. And then we'll have a loop that goes from the beginning to the end. So while I is less than data.length. And then we'll increment I by 8 on each iteration. Yeah, that seems right. And then we're going to push a chunk in there, which is going to be data.slice. We want to create a slice of the array that goes from I to I plus 8. Because it's non-inclusive. So that should give us a bunch of chunks. And then we need to reverse those chunks. And then we need to join it back all together into a single array. So we need to flatten it. Isn't there a built-in flatten in arrays? Is it smoosh? Flat. Creates a new array with all subarray elements concatenated. Yeah, so we just want flat. All right, here it is. First try. Nice. Attempt. First try. First try. Well, that was fun. Okay, great work, everybody. You did good. If you want to go try and solve it, there's the link there. Should we do one more? Or should we start answering questions? We already got 7 questions. Let's start answering questions. It always gets to a point where I get too many questions, and then I can't answer them all, so let's do our best. I was told this would take 10 minutes. It might take, it depends. It always depends. It's like sometimes the 6 Qs are hard, sometimes they're not. Lakshman says, generate YouTube timestamps based on the auto transcripts from a YouTube video. Yeah, I want to do this eventually. I don't think I'll do this today because it's going to take some research, but I just got access to GPT-4 via the API, and that's what I'm going to need because my live streams are hours long. And so I need a lot of tokens to be able to summarize the whole thing. But yeah, this is a good idea. We're going to definitely do something like that eventually. All right. I will answer this question because I know this one came in first. The GPT-4 was like on a wait list. You still have to pay for it. It was on a wait list, and I recently got access to it. Maybe everybody got access to it. I don't know. Yeah. Well, the idea would be to automatically create chapters. I think that's what they're saying here. And by timestamps, we mean like, yeah, the transcript already says what was said at what time, but we want to summarize that and say, oh, for this 10-minute chunk, CJ was talking about open source projects or something like that. All right, but let's answer this question from Wackiator, who says, when looking at open source projects to contribute to, do you first familiarize yourself with the code base, or do you get an issue assigned, then explore the code base based on the issue? I think it's a little bit of both, but I lean toward the second thing. And this doesn't just apply to open source projects. This is like, let's say you're working a job and you got assigned to a new project, or you got moved to another team, or you just joined a company and like you're trying to figure out their code base. I almost always just try to figure out the one thing that I'm working on, because if you try to get yourself familiarized with the entire code base, it's going to take a long time, and ultimately the thing that you end up working on probably won't be won't require you to know how the entire thing works. So yeah, typically just I would say the former, because you will have to set up the project, right? So in order to set up the project, you might need to familiarize yourself with, like, depending on the kind of project, I don't know where the models are, or like what kind of dev process there is. Do you have to spin up the Docker container? So that's going to require you to touch more than the specific feature that you're working on just to get it set up locally. But then after that, I start to target and just work on the thing specifically, that the specific issue that I'm working on. So that's how I do it. Anybody in the chat, if you have any experience with that or comments on it, feel free to throw it in the chat. And then also, should we try to contribute to an open source project? I don't even know what we would do. I've contributed to Vite recently. The thing is, like, any open source project we choose, it's going to take like a lot of research just to figure out how to solve the issue that we pick. I don't know. What if we look at the Vue? Let's look at the Vue repo. Let's see. Fix the typo. That's normally what I do. Oh, actually, yeah, that's a great point, Limotes. Yeah, no, beautiful point, because I actually did contribute to Vite recently. Honestly, let's see if I didn't even know if it made it into the release yet, but let me show you what I did for that. I'd be curious if they have had a release since then. Yeah. Honestly, let's do this. If we generate a React plus TypeScript app with Vite, you're gonna see my change in there, which is actually really fun, because that means thousands of people are going to get my one little line of code that I wrote. Check it out. React TS example. So if you choose React, if you choose React with TypeScript or React with JavaScript, you will see these changes. So if you go to the ESLint config, this one little line of code is what I added, because without this line of code, the ESLint config actually breaks. Doesn't seem to be breaking though, which is kind of funny. Oh, because I didn't install dependencies, that's why. All right, hopefully we can see this error now. So if you go in here, yeah. So this is what happened when people would generate a Vite project with React and TypeScript. This little parsing error would show up there. Well, not that. I lost it. I lost the change. Actually, I think I could do it from memory. So it's something like ESLint disable, or ESLint env node. How does a comment work? Is it // Well, let me show you how I found it. So, basically, if I wanted to add that little piece of code for the generated React TypeScript app, VS just Code doesn't like it. Let's reload the window. Okay. Well, no. Oh no. Is this a new error that needs to be fixed? Yeah. This is a new error that needs to be fixed. No. Dang. Well, here's the issue. This says include. Well, it says include store. Is there an exclude in the TX config? Yeah. That's what we need. Oh, that's CJS. Well, here's the thing. If we fix this, we can make another PR to Vite, which is, I think, why it's worth fixing this. First of all, I just want to confirm that this is actually an issue. So let me start over here. Let's remove that React TS example thing. And then do it again. Install dependencies first. Run the linter. No linter errors. Look at the file. There's an error. Okay. So we're going to fix this. We're going to fix this issue, but let's just talk about how I found where this code even was. So when you go to the Vite repo, there's a lot of stuff to look at here. One thing you should get familiar with, especially if you're contributing to projects in the JavaScript and Node.js world, is most open source projects are using a mono repo, which means they typically have this folder called packages. So if you click on packages, these are actually multiple projects that are actually like published to NPM that all live within this one repo. So that's kind of like the first place to start is go into the packages directory to see if you can find which of the projects you want to contribute to and like where that code actually is. So specifically, what I wanted to do is when someone runs this command, npm create Vite, and then they choose React and TypeScript, I wanted to change the code that got generated. And so I know that would be in create Vite, because create Vite is the sub command that gets run here when you create a Vite project, which is different from Vite. Because so if you look at a generated Vite project, in the package.json, it has a dev dependency on Vite. So if you wanted to contribute to the actual Vite library, then you would go into this directory. And then you would look through the source code in there. But we wanted to contribute to create Vite because that's the thing that generates projects. So I knew that I needed to start looking in here. And then from there, there specifically are Vite, V-I-T-E. There specifically are React, TypeScript, and React directories. So if we look in this, this is the code that's used to actually generate a Vite project. And if we look at the file, this is what I knew I needed to modify in order to fix it. So I think just because I'm used to contributing to Node projects, I was able to find it fairly quickly. But ultimately, like especially for this change that I made, or in this PR that I made, what do I want to say? Oh yeah, like I didn't, there's no need for me to understand the entire Vite dependency or really even understand how create Vite works, right? Because if you could go in and you could start to read their source of like how this actually generates projects, let's see what it does. It does a lot. It does a lot. And I think it's using like a library to ask questions on the command line and stuff like that. Like we have all these frameworks and then like there's a bunch like I don't even need to know what this file does because the contribution that I was making was simply just to update one of the templates. So that's honestly just to answer your question. That's my main advice is just try to target what exactly you're doing. But I do know, yeah, so your comment was I feel comfortable programming, but it's been very overwhelming to get started. Yeah, you kind of just have to dive in. Does Vite rhyme with bite or night? Neither. It rhymes with feet. Vite rhymes with feet. So Vite or is French for fast, I'm pretty sure. Vite? Vite? But yeah, honestly, it just takes practice of just like diving in and doing like just trying to figure out what you need to do. Okay, so now we want to actually fix this issue. So and we'll make another pull request. One thing you also should do is if you're about to fix an issue that you didn't find through the issues tab, you should see if somebody has opened that issue yet. So let's do that because it's very likely somebody has. So if we look at this error that's popping up now, parsing error, ESLint was not configured. Let's see if someone has already opened an issue. Yes. So they opened this 3 days ago. Actually, somebody's already fixed it. So it's good to know I actually don't need to make this change. Um, so they open the issue. And then, uh, did somebody fix it? Here we go. Fix create VESLint production for React templates. Move the scope of the lint command to the root so it avoids a mismatch between IDE. Let's see what they changed. Somebody already fixed it, yeah. Under project, they specify the TS config. They say lint this directory, so that way that will actually pick up the errors. And then we have ignore patterns. I feel like they made too many changes, but I'm not going to make the change now because they're already working on it, and I'm sure the Vite team will have some back and forth here to determine how to fix this. But this is more than what's required just to fix the issue. I think that's the other thing. Typically, when you're contributing to open source, you want to make sure you're only doing one specific thing at a time. Like this change of the lint command. I guess this makes sense for this PR because the linter wasn't giving an error before. So that makes sense. Adding the projects, I don't know about that. Adding root true, I think makes sense everywhere, not just in the React template. And then also, yeah, this ignore patterns this is what I'm saying is extra. It has nothing to do with the actual error. Did they change the TS config though? They added ignore patterns to the eslint rc.cjs. I see. So because they changed it to the root, they have to ignore dist because before it was only looking in the source directory. Okay, I'm okay with those changes. I think the root true here is extra, but everything else I'm okay with. Okay, what you're looking at is somebody that fixed the issue. All right, I don't know how useful that was, but ultimately, Wackiator, I think the advice is you kind of just got to dive in. And typically, what I do is I only try to fix the thing that is specifically the issue, and I only learn about the code base that with the things that have to do with the issue that I'm trying to fix. That's basically what I do. Okay, let's keep moving. And thank you for your question, Wackiator. Fob says, what have you done in your time off? I went to Denver Fan Expo. I went camping. I went hiking. I did some yard work, cleaned up my house a little bit. Thing is, I didn't even consider it time off. It was just like, yeah, I guess I won't stream. that's basically what happened. But I'm back and I have streams planned all this week. So definitely check out the schedule. I have streams all over the schedule. So today I'm in the morning, like the normal time that I stream. But tomorrow I'm doing it in the evening. This will be friendly for people in Asia and Australia. Wednesday, midday stream. Thursday, early morning stream. And then Friday is back to your regularly scheduled listed programming. Okay. Let's pick another one to answer. Nevetscar says, what's my opinion on Nix OS? I haven't heard of it. So let's look at it. Reproducible builds and deployments. I don't know why I would use it, and I can't tell from their landing page. So that's my opinion on it. So yeah. It's like Docker containers. Okay. Okay. And Sabath, thank you for the resub. Appreciate you. Did I miss any other supports? No, I didn't. Okay, this next one comes from Angels or Angles? Angels. I'm starting a coding bootcamp in a few weeks for Python. Do you think it's worth spending the next few weeks studying algorithms and maths before I begin? Probably not. First of all, it also it depends because it depends on like the coding boot camp that you're going to. Like I don't know what their curriculum is or what they focus on there. Um, and actually I don't know how intense it is or how long it is. I used to teach at a coding boot camp. I didn't teach Python. I taught JavaScript. And if I had advice for someone that was about to start my boot camp years ago when I was teaching there, it would probably be to relax and enjoy your freedom, or like your free time before the boot camp starts, because boot camps are uh, uh, a lot. They're a lot. I didn't skip your question, Oxy. I'm picking ones that I want to answer right now, but I will try to answer your question later. Um, yeah, boot camps can be very intense, and it's going to take a lot of your time, a lot of your energy, and you're already going to have to spend so much time and energy once you start. And the thing is, like if you went off to do some self-study, it's not going to hurt, right? You can study all you want, but typically with a coding boot camp, they have a plan for you, right? they specifically are going to, like, in the boot camp is a very specific length, and they've run it multiple times before. They've run students through it, so I would hope that they know what the amount of time required to cover specific topics and stuff like that. So I think that's another potential issue, is if you try to do this stuff with self-study and then you start to learn it in the course, it could be potentially a little bit confusing because maybe you learned it slightly differently, and all of that. Now, yeah, so my advice is just relax. Relax. Also, if you have the opportunity to, or you know how to, you should reach out to your instructors or the admissions people to say, hey, is there anything that you'd like me to do? Because that's better. That's a better place to get the advice from, is the people that are actually going to be teaching the course, because they could say, well, we expect you to be proficient in these things, and so if you're not proficient in those things, then it might make sense to spend your time doing those things. But yeah. And so Angel says, appreciate that. Sounds like it. Very sensible advice. It's going to be an intense course. Yeah. So enjoy your free time while you have it. And keep that attitude though, right? Because once you start the boot camp, like it's going to be a lot. It's going to be a lot. So do your best, all that good stuff. I think the one last thing I'll mention though is like, from the teacher's perspective, because when I taught at a coding boot camp, it actually is like a lot of times slightly more disruptive for the class if there are students that like already know the topics, and they because they've potentially already covered the topics before, they don't listen as well in class. They potentially think that they know more than the instructor, or that they can teach the other students, and that almost always doesn't end well. So that's a potential thing you could run up against as well. I would say if you do know the topics that are being covered, don't act like you know it all. Keep an open ear, because there's probably still things you can learn from your instructors and stuff like that. So yeah. Be humble, sit down, and learn. Cool. All right, let's keep moving. Any non-streamed personal projects exciting to you lately? I'm gonna start working on my camper van again. I honestly might stream some of it though, but right now I'm trying to organize my shed because it has all of my supplies and tools. I'm trying to get that organized, and then I'm trying to make a plan. But that's exciting. I hope to have my camper van more usable than it is right now. So that's what I'm working on. Anything else? No, that's mainly it. Yeah. Cool. Can I do a Svelte stream without SvelteKit? Yeah, I want to do this eventually. The thing is, like, I guess that's the funny thing about like all the SvelteKit stuff that I've been doing. I've barely been touching Svelte, right? Most of what I've been doing is like DevOps and testing, and it almost has nothing to do with SvelteKit. But I know there are some of you that would like to see an intro to like how to build apps with Svelte and like what Svelte is and how it works. I'll do that eventually. Will we do it today? Maybe I'll keep your question here. Maybe if we're looking for some code to write, we'll do like an intro to Svelte, like a quick one. All right. Um, yeah. I don't know if I have a good answer for this one because I don't do a lot of low level development. What's the most important thing I should focus on in the C language? I would say though, if you're a new programmer, like this is your first programming language, then you should focus on programming fundamentals like conditionals, variables, functions, iterators, um, like dictionaries and hash maps, or in the JavaScript world, they're just called objects. Loops. You somewhat answered their question. Yeah. Do you do a lot of C, Finder the Icewing? How to use pointers to allocate and deallocate memory? Yeah. So, and that's the thing. Like with C, with the C programming language, you're doing typically doing manual memory management, which is not something you have to do in higher level languages like JavaScript, which is what I use most often. So yeah, learning about pointers and memory allocation, that's probably some of the most important stuff. Yeah. Ines Mutable agrees with all of that. Cool. What's the difference between an iterator and a loop? Um, I think an iterator can be a specific type of thing that iterates, but loops are a form of iteration. That's basically what I was saying. Um, I don't know if I said iteration and loops, but they're kind of the same thing. In certain programming languages, you can have an iterator which basically allows itself to be iterated on. But you should just know about loops. That's basically all I'm saying. Yeah. So like in Java and C#, I think you can even have iterators in JavaScript. It's specifically an object that either implements an iterator interface or has specific methods that allow it to like allow the outside world to say like give me the next thing or go on to the next thing. So yeah. So hopefully that helped. All loops iterate, but not all iterators loop. I guess so, but the thing is, specifically an iterator. Honestly, we should look it up on Wikipedia. An iterator is an object that enables a programmer to traverse a container, particularly lists. Yeah. So okay, I have a good a better description of this. In JavaScript, an array is an iterator because if you were to do a for of or for in loop, this works on iterable objects. So the iterable protocol basically says that this object implements symbol.iterator, and it implements like a next method, it has a done property and a value property. So behind the scenes, when you pass something into a for of, as long as it implements the iterable protocol, this code will work. Like you could literally create your own object and have a custom way of iterating. So when someone passes your iterable into a for of loop, you can have code behind the scenes that basically determines what that element value will be. If that's over your head, then don't worry about it. Just focus on the fundamentals. But yeah, that's what an iterator or an iterable is. Yeah. Yeah, and I think specifically for each is implemented, at least in JavaScript, it's implemented on arrays. It's not on all iterables. But for each is an example of something that could operate on an iterable, if that makes sense. All right, what do I want to answer next? Yeah, I'll answer this one just because I don't think I have any good advice for this. WebNeat says, I built some projects, but learned that I need to also be good at building hype and advertising my stuff if I want people to use them. Yeah. Any advice on how to do that? I generally post it on Reddit, Hacker News, and Twitter. Anything else I should do? Yeah, this is the thing. So myself as a content creator, I basically have to be a social media marketer to get my stuff in front of people's eyes and get them like wanting to watch my stuff and consume my stuff. So I don't think I have any good advice on it because I'm not a very good advertiser. But I think you have the right idea. That's basically what you need to do. Is it needs to be posted in multiple places. You need to get people talking about it. Um, I think the other thing is you need to make sure that you have a good elevator pitch for like what your thing is. So like if I go to your website or if I go to your GitHub repo, in the first 20 seconds, I want to know what it is and like why it is I should be interested in your project. Explain your thing in 15 minutes or in 15 seconds or less, and your website and your GitHub repo should do the same thing. If it doesn't, like if it takes me like a while to like figure out like what does this even do? Why would I need this? Then it's going to be very hard for me to decide, okay, let me look deeper into this, and then also decide, oh, I like this. Let me share it with someone else. So I think it's probably the first thing you should focus on if you haven't yet is make sure you have a good elevator pitch. Make sure it's really easy to understand what your thing does and why it's useful for people up front. Yeah, and you be able to explain it. So the Richard Feynman style is like explaining it for like complete beginners in a way, like basically explaining things in a way that don't require a lot of previous like understanding or knowledge or or experience or knowledge. But yeah, for example, this NixOS thing that somebody told me about, they're like, hey, what do you think about this? All right, I go here. It says reproducible builds and deployments. When I read this, because I'm familiar with Docker, that's where my mind goes to. It's like, all right, is this a replacement for Docker? And then it says Nix is a tool that takes a unique approach to package management and system configuration. All right. But then when I read that, I'm like, well, I don't typically use Docker for package management, but I guess you could, because inside of a Docker container, like you're managing its dependencies. So yeah, but this makes me think it's for something else that's not like Docker. Learn how to make reproducible, declarative, and reliable systems. This line makes me think, okay, this is basically just Docker. So I think if we're talking about this problem for NixOS, I mean, honestly, I have no idea how popular NixOS even is. like maybe it's really popular. I have no idea. This is my first time hearing about it. But I think for NixOS specifically, like if their target audience is people that already use Docker and they need to switch to it, then that should be kind of like how they should sell me on it. And they're not doing that. And now I have to watch a video to understand. Wondering how to start using Nix? Yes, but I didn't need to see you type that. I mean, obviously I'm being very critical right now, but it's like, that's why I clicked away from this. I don't know what it does. I don't know how I'm going to benefit from it. So I'm not going to spend the time learning it. Now, if someone else comes along and they create like an example that like really shows the use case for Nix and like why I should use it, and all that, then that would help. But yeah, I mean, we're seeing an example of like, I mean, I hate to be critical of it, but that's basically is like, that's kind of what we're dealing with here is like, I show up, I actually don't even know what it's for or why I would use it. And then I move on. Yeah. Like, so, I mean, to give an example, like, because I'm familiar with Docker and because I'm familiar with like Docker Compose and like YAML configuration and everything else, I would think maybe that's their target audience. So if that's the case, then maybe they show an example on their landing page that like shows how you would replace Docker with Nix. So yeah, Replit uses Nix. A tool for managing software packages and system configurations. Fascinating. I see. So you can have multiple versions of like Node installed at the same time. I have a specific tool that already does that. I use Node Version Manager. I guess we'll watch this. Here are a few examples. Node, console log, that. Interesting. No node on this machine. I get it. So here's the thing. This is cute, right? It's cute that it's typing out. I'm a very fast reader. I don't want to have to wait for every, I don't have to wait for every letter to show up. Just show it to me. Yeah, I would call this cute, not useful. Oh, I see. So yeah, so then you can say, give me Node.js, and now they have Node.js. So it's not a Docker replacement? Okay, let's build a minimal Docker image with Nix. They built a Redis image with Docker, but where did Nix come into play? This is basically what I mean. I don't know. Like I could be missing something, but I still don't understand. Like I get the use case now where if I need Node.js and I don't want to install it directly, I can use Nix to do that, and then potentially have multiple versions installed, and then also have a configuration for my project that says I use this specific version of Node, and then when someone else comes along, they can spin up that specific version of Node. Seems fine. Seems fine. But I didn't get that from their value from their elevator pitch. So honestly, I think I'll stop talking about this now. But that's basically my advice. Is like I need to know up front what this thing does and like why I should spend my time learning it or even like looking into it. And then beyond that, you absolutely share it on Reddit, share it on Hacker News. I think the other thing is like if in terms of sharing it on social media like Twitter, if you can get buy-in from Twitter accounts that have a lot of followers, right? So if you get someone in the dev community that already has a big following, you reach out to them potentially, they see your thing, they like what you've done, and then they talk about it. That's another way to drum up interest. And then on Reddit, just create a bunch of fake accounts and like talk like you're interested in the project, because that's what most people do. There are so many bots on Reddit. I guess it's going to be harder to create bots these days because of the API changes, but Reddit is just a bunch of fake users upvoting and commenting on things. Whereas if you come along and you see that, you don't realize that it's actually fake people talking about it. And then from what I've seen lately, Hacker News is just turning into Reddit. Like people are really negative, and I don't know. I'm gonna stop talking about this, but hopefully that gave you a little bit of insight. Webneat is like, not only do you have to like advertise it everywhere, but you have to very quickly sell people on what your thing is and why it's useful and why they should even care about it. Yeah. BTRSL is asking, what's the next thing in programming, not including AI? I have no idea. Yeah, I have no idea. I think it is AI. It's AI generated code stuffs. I think that's the next thing in programming. Everything else is just an iteration on things that already exist. Like barely anything is new. Spatial computing? I don't even know what that is, but it sounds interesting. It's true, Dana True, and I think that's basically the point I was getting at. Is like, yeah, people have really short attention spans. You gotta hook them quick, or you lose them. So yeah, I don't have an opinion on this. JavaScript frameworks might finally take off. The thing is, like, the Apple Vision Pro is just VR. Actually, there was a really good video by MKBHD. He talks about how Apple did not use the term VR or virtual reality once in their entire announcement. And that's because there's already a lot of stigma around VR and virtual reality. So when Apple released the Apple Vision Pro, they came up with all these new words and terms. It's just virtual reality with pass-through. But the thing is, it's not, I don't think it's more AR because it's just pass-through video, right? And there are already VR headsets that can do that. It's kind of AR. It can like float things in your environment, but that's very different from the AR that like HoloLens does, where like it maps an entire environment and can like put digital objects on a table or on the floor, and it knows the differences between them and stuff like that. That to me, that's augmented reality. Overlaying a movie screen or a computer window in your current environment is way less augmented reality than actually interpreting the environment and having like 3D objects interact with the environment as if they know the layout. You know, that's really all I'm saying. So what's the next thing? I don't know. I don't know. Let's see what else. Hamster Boy is asking, when you build a project with a microservice architecture, should each microservice have a separate repository? I have not built the thing with a microservice architecture, I would think you probably want to use a monorepo tool, because a lot of times those microservices probably have common dependencies, and like your team might work on a single library that's used by multiple of the microservices, so it would make sense to be in a monorepo. Not a monolith, a monorepo with a tool like NX or Turbo Repo or Lerna, if that's still relevant. Because I haven't built something with a microservice architecture, but I did build something for a client a few years back that had multiple pieces to it. Like it had 3 APIs, it had 3 different front ends, it had like a shared database library, and I had the easiest time working with everything when it was in a mono repo. Because the first thing I did was have everything in a separate repo and then use like git installs as dependencies between them. But if you're iterating fast and those dependencies are changing often, it's really cumbersome to manage like NPM dependencies between projects and stuff like that. So yeah, I would suggest use a mono repo. I don't know if anybody in the chat has a similar thought on microservice architecture. Yeah, so WebNeat says use a mono repo. Separate repos are a nightmare. In my experience, yes, but again, it wasn't microservices, but it was services that all needed to like talk to each other. I guess you probably could have called it microservices. I don't know. What's up, Veritatas? What IT stuff do you enjoy recently? Ched Dev, he's on Twitch. I don't know if he's streamed recently, but he let me borrow his drone. So I'm getting more interested in drones now. And if you watch my recent YouTube video, actually, let me just play the intro. I'm really proud of my editing, and then I'm really happy with the drone footage that we got while we were out camping, because I went camping with Ched recently. Yeah, drones are cool. So I'm gonna learn more about them. I'm gonna make sure I have all the right certifications and everything else to do the drone thing. But watch this intro. Hello, friends. Welcome to Coding Garden. We're out early to catch the sunrise and also answer some of your coding questions. So let's get to it. Look at these shots. It's unreal that I was literally the one flying the drone to get these shots. And then this is just me walking. But yeah, drones are cool. Drones are really cool. Let me show you this other shot that we got. Where was it? Yeah, this one. You can get really cool sights like this, and this is all. This is unreal. So this Ched is the one that got this shot. This was on his. Oh, you guys are seeing an ad. Oh wait. This was on his Air 2S drone, and it was sunset. Just enjoying the outdoors. Now, I will admit there can be bad parts of camping. Like, is this a movie? No, like, it doesn't look real. No, like the thing is, I was there. I was at the campsite while he was flying his drone and getting these shots. It's amazing. This is all part of it. And then I think I added some drone shots in. I got really like clever at some points, kind of pretentious with the editing. Yeah, like this. What you've done is good enough according to your own terms or according to the business terms, then you can stop there. But yeah, rewriting, redoing is almost never a good choice. Like, humans are really bad at estimating and projecting, and so you're like, oh. I don't think so, America 2050. It just literally has that many. Like, if we refresh, it might go up. It's gone up. It's coming up. But yeah, I'm proud of that footage. I'm proud of that video. Yeah, we made it to 1,000. Yeah, thanks everybody. Thanks for your watches. But yeah, if you can click that link, watch the latest YouTube video. Why was I talking about that? Because drones. Drones are cool. I want to learn more about them. I want to get better at flying them, and I want to get all the right certifications and everything so I can get cool footage. Because like I want to make more YouTube videos that like have footage of the world in them with like commentary from me, and that's kind of what I'm interested in. I'll probably learn more about like cameras and stuff like that, because everything in that video was filmed just on my phone, but it'd be nice to get a nice camera and get into that too. So that's mainly what I'm interested in. Trello drone? What's up, Crafty Becky? Oh, the Tello? Oh, you can program it yourself. Wait, it's only $100? Come on, Sesh. You're too kind. Thank you for the gifts. That's awesome. Congrats to everybody that got gifted. Yeah, this is cool. You can program it? Yeah, this needs to be fixed in the overlay. these empty messages. It's for beginners and programmers. Cool. But does it have a camera? Oh well. All right, let's keep answering. All right, let's answer this one from Scooz News, who says, "Learner here, still not working in the industry as a dev. I struggle completing and styling projects once I can see the path and learn what it's trying to teach. I get eager to move on to the next concept or project. What's an appropriate way to balance forward momentum and wrapping up a learning project?" I think, first of all, so I think, let me target exactly what you're saying here, because, so once I see the path and learn what it's trying to teach, once I can see the path and learn what it's trying to teach, I get eager to move on to the next thing. So basically what you're saying is, you feel like you already understand the thing that you were trying to learn, and you can see the next thing. So like you're just like, I'm not gonna worry about that anymore. I'm just gonna learn the next thing because I feel like I've already learned that other thing. I think you should get in the habit of really checking your understanding, because it can be so easy to just think that you understand a topic because an instructor explained it really well or a video explained it really well. But you can't really say you understand that thing until you've actually tried to do it and implemented it yourself. So I think you should try to focus more on, well, not focus more on, start to think about and really ask yourself, do I understand this topic? Like, and the way that you do that is to show that you can actually do it without watching a video or reading a tutorial. Because if you can't, then that means you haven't mastered those concepts yet. That means that even though you want to move on to the next thing, you still haven't mastered the thing that you were working on before. So an appropriate way to balance forward momentum and wrapping up, realize that like if you just keep going on to the next thing and you don't solidify your understanding of the things that it builds on top of, at a certain point you're going to have a basis of knowledge that is built on a very not, what's the word? I was going to use like building analogies. You're basically building on a shady foundation, a flimsy foundation. I like the word flimsy, right? So like each thing that you move on to probably had some dependencies on the thing that you were learning before that. And if you haven't solidified those, you're just moving on, and now you have this really flimsy structure that everything's built on top of. And eventually you're going to hit a point where it really tests your understanding, and then the tower crumbles, if we're using building analogies. So an appropriate way to balance it is to make sure that you actually do have decent mastery before moving on. And because yeah. So excuse me says perfect, makes total sense. I think I have a hard time with rabbit holes and trying to deeply understand something before moving on. Yeah, and I think it's a fine balance, right? It's either it's either like you only like cover it slightly and then move on directly, or you just like dive way too deep. Yeah. So it's two sides of that, but I think you should have some kind of mechanism to keep that front of mind, like keep the end goal in front of mind, right? Because like learning all of these concepts and like one after another, there's some end goal, right? I think ultimately like your end goal for some of this stuff is like you want to build a project of a specific kind. And so if you ask yourself when you're like potentially in a rabbit hole or something else like that, like is this will this be effective to get to my end goal? And if it's not, maybe you need to get out of that rabbit hole. Yes, a Jenga like structure. um, you need coworkers to learn better with people with experience. Oh, I don't know what that was a reference to. Yeah, I like this from NS Mutable. So do deliberate practice repos. Write it in your own words and examples. Yeah, like a lot of people don't realize like this is why when you're in school, you often hear in your own words describe X. the reason that we do that is because it forces you to prove that you actually understand something, right? Because it's super easy to just reiterate exactly what someone else said or like exactly something that you read or something that you watched, but it takes a completely different part of the brain to be able to say it in your own words and in your own understanding, potentially with your own analogies that really proves that you actually do understand it. Yeah. Cool. Oh, cool. The Telodrone has a video. That's good to know. Oh, thank you, Sage. Thanks for being here. Basically, it was like my summer break, I guess. Yeah. See one, do one, teach one. Yeah. So you see somebody do it, either an instructor or in a video, um, or you read it in an article. Do it yourself, and then also teach it, and that really shows that you actually understand it. Yeah. I can never cite precisely what someone else said. That being said, I was bad at school. Yeah, and I mean, I think like paraphrasing is a good form of like showing your understanding because it shows that you were able to pick out the key points in your summary. Um, but yeah, So yeah, hopefully that helps, Scooz News. Thanks for your question. Let's see. Are you streaming on Twitch right now, Omar? Are you new to Twitch? Yeah, you shouldn't. Maybe you're new to Twitch, but you should not advertise yourself in other people's streams. That's just rude. Because I'm live right now, and your message will get people to leave my stream and go to your stream. You don't want to do that. You want to build relationships. So like if you hang out in the chat, you answer people's questions, or you're kind, or you ask questions. Eventually, people will see, oh, that person in the chat was cool. Maybe I'll click on their username and see that they're streaming. But you don't want to just advertise yourself in other people's streams. Harsh, are you the one that asked this? Actually, I'll play this video next. I'll play this because it got cut from the video. So Harsh asks how to handle transactions in Supabase. And this is easy to answer because I already answered it in a video. So I'm gonna play you all that clip now. But the video it didn't make it to YouTube. I wanted to edit the video down to be like shorter. So it didn't make it in the edit. I'm going to show you something that no one has seen before that didn't make it in the recent YouTube video. All right. Is everyone ready? Yeah, this is the director's cut. uh, is the sound on? All right, I'll turn me off too. take for the rest of your life, especially if you haven't done camping before. So the next question's from Harsh, and I'm gonna sit down for this one just to make sure that I can answer it, all right? Harsh asks, how do you handle transactions in Supabase? So if you're not familiar, transactions are a way of doing multiple things in a database and then undoing the first things you did if some of the last things you did failed. So you have multiple things you wanna do, you start the transaction, they start to work. If one of the things fails, everything you did gets rolled back. Rollback is the term we use to describe what happens when those queries essentially get undone. Personally, I haven't tried to do this in Supabase, but I looked into it on my LTE connection out here in the woods. And you basically have two options. So the first one is you can create a stored procedure and then do RPC. So a stored procedure is basically a way of writing a function that lives inside of a database, and you can do that with Supabase. So Supabase is essentially like managed Postgres. So in their dashboard, they actually have a place where you can write stored procedures, and then you can actually call those stored procedures from the client library. Now, if you're new to this, you may be cautious because you're like, why would I write code in my SQL database? But before the days of like SQL code living in application code, like in our Node.js app with an ORM or even just like a database driver or something like that, and I say in the days before, people still do it this way. People write direct SQL, and a lot of database devs want that logic stored in the database. For one, it's going to be quicker because it's executing directly in the database versus having to be executed like in Node.js or in Java or in C# that then goes across a database driver to communicate with the database. So some people actually do prefer to write their logic in the database. The other thing about that is it will kind of force you to learn more about Postgres. So you'll essentially be forced to learn some of the Postgres-specific SQL dialect and also learn what stored procedures are and different things like that. So I think it's worth exploring, but depending on how complex your transaction needs to be, it may be more difficult to implement, right? Because basically with a stored procedure, you have certain inputs and then you give certain outputs. So if you can't really work your solution into that format, you might need to do something else. The other option is to write your code that has a transaction and put it into a serverless or an edge function, or just deploy a Node.js API that talks directly to the Postgres database that actually backs your Supabase database. So if you didn't know this, Supabase is just based on top of Postgres. You can actually go into your settings, get the direct Postgres connection URL, and connect directly to the database. So you could literally write a backend application that talks to your Postgres database, and in some serverless function or in an express request handler, you could write the code that does a transaction. So for instance, you could install the PG library, you could look at their docs, see how transactions are done, and then write a serverless function or a request handler that does the transaction, and then now you can just call that from your front-end code. Now this is a bit more complex because now you also have to deal with auth, right? So one of the benefits of using something like Supabase is that it's database as a service, and it has row-level security in the database itself, which basically allows you to lock down the reads and the writes that happen to specific tables so that you can make those queries from the front end. The moment you start doing things in your own back end, you now have to start dealing with authentication and also like doing things on behalf of the user that made the request, which is doable, but you now just need to integrate that same auth code into your backend so that the requests made from your front end are on behalf of the correct user and have the right privileges and everything else. But this is definitely a viable option, especially if you already know Node.js and JavaScript. You can write a little serverless function and deploy it to Vercel or Netlify functions or Firebase functions or, of course, Supabase functions, which I didn't think about. But Supabase also has a functions offering, so you could write some backend code that does a transaction, store it in a Supabase function, and then call that from your front-end code. And now that I think about it, they probably have a way to tie that into auth as well. I don't know, I haven't used it, but those are some of your options. Hopefully that helps. And I guess I didn't address it to begin with, because you might be asking the question, like, why doesn't the Supabase SDK support transactions to begin with? Well, Supabase is actually based on top of Postgres, which is a open source library that takes a Postgres database and turns it into a REST API. So Supabase is just using that mechanism to give you this database as a service with a bunch of other stuff added onto it and a bunch of other open source packages that are assembled together to make it a more seamless experience. So if you look at the Postgres repo, there actually are some open issues where people are asking, well, when are you going to support transactions? And for the way that Postgres is architected, it's a pretty technically hard solution to come up with, which is why it doesn't exist in Postgres yet. But I'll link that issue in the description. You can read more about it. But essentially, it's not supported directly, but you do have some other options. Hello again. Um, Hopefully that helped. I think I'll post some put some links in the um wait, there. But yeah, that was um a coding garden exclusive. No. That was an edit from that was an edit. Um yeah, so okay, but let me give you a few links. So if you look at Supabase, um look in their docs. And specifically, if you click on database and then managing database functions, this is how you can do a function inside of Supabase. So you could write a function that like does a transaction. Um, and then the other thing is if you look at edge functions, this is a way like you could write an edge function that uses the PG library, like I was saying, and that this probably, if you're going to do it this way, it would make sense to deploy it to Supabase edge functions because then you can integrate it with auth. So whatever edge function you write will work on behalf of the user with this auth thing. So yeah. Cool. Well, that was easy. I didn't even have to do any work. I just played a video. But yeah, so that was cut from my recent YouTube video. So basically, the original edit was 30 minutes long, and I was like, if I want anybody to watch this, it's gotta be like under 20 minutes. So some of the more specific code questions I actually cut from the video. All right. What's the oldest one on here? Find the Ice Wing 55 minutes ago. Part 2? Well, I just thought like the thing is like, if it was a part 2, I don't think it would get as much views because it's like specific, right? So the questions I'm answering in the YouTube video are like very broad, like it's a wide audience. All right. Finder the Icewing asks, I was wondering when and where to use Lambda functions and how to create my own. Lambda functions are basically just a different architecture for a backend app. You submitted an idea. Where'd the ideas tab go? Oh, it's down here. Update to the new calendar. Nah. This one's fine. Mainly because it has all the features, right? You can click on it, you can add it to your calendar. That's a lot. Okay. The question is, when and where to use Lambda functions. So basically, anywhere you would have had some kind of request handler in backend code, you can replace that with a Lambda function. Or a serverless function. And also edge function, like serverless function and edge function. Edge function is like slightly different because of the way it's deployed, but like serverless, edge, Lambda, it's all in the same group of things. And a Lambda isn't an arrow. I mean, I guess it can be an arrow function in a programming language, but if we're talking about AWS Lambda, like that's what they call it, AWS Lambda, which is basically their serverless offering. Let's write all of this out because I'm saying a lot of things. So let's write them out. What's up, Alex? Welcome in. Yeah. Serverless. So first of all, we'll define serverless because it's not actually serverless. Then we'll talk about AWS Lambda, which is a type of serverless offering. Ways to do serverless. And then, okay, so platform as a service. I guess we'll write it out. There's AWS Lambda. What is the Google Lambda functions? Like what do they have? Not Lambda. because Lambda is different. That's like Chat GPT stuff. Serverless. They call it serverless. It's literally called Google Serverless. Yeah, Azure Functions would be another one. No, this is not platform as a service. This is, I mean, it kind of is, but infrastructure as a service. Because platform as a service is slightly different, and that would be my recommendation. Is like doing any one of these things manually is a lot. Anything else that should be in this list of like infrastructure as a service, so Google App Engine, I feel like is like slightly different because that's more like Heroku, isn't it? We're specifically talking about serverless offerings. Because if we're to talk about platform as a service, Versal is probably like at the top of that list just in terms of popularity. But Versal is just running on top of AWS Lambda. And then also Firebase Cloud Functions are just running on top of Google Serverless. And then Netlify Functions. Netlify Functions are just running, I believe they're just running on top of AWS Lambda. And then you have Firebase, no, Supabase Functions. And I'm guessing those are running on top of AWS. I don't know. But there's literally a framework called Serverless. Yeah, the Serverless framework. And in my experience, if you're going to do, yeah, I think Cloudflare Workers would be in this category, but I don't know where they're hosted. And then there's OpenShift. Cool. I haven't heard of this, but that's what I was thinking. Is this just running on top of AWS? Or is Cloudflare just running on top of AWS? All of this to say, there's a lot of different places you could choose to do this, but ultimately, if you build something in a serverless way, you could potentially deploy it to these different places, and these platform as a service are typically going to be a lot easier to deploy to. You have potentially less control over where it's running or what the kind of machine that it's running on, but a lot of times you don't want to care about that stuff. Whereas with this, there's a lot more fine-grained control, but requires a lot more. Now, I have helped someone that was using the serverless framework before, and this basically gives you a way of working with AWS Lambda, and then there's also what's the thing you put in front of AWS Lambda? API gateway? Is that the one? I think it is. And Marvin, thank you for that Prime. Because AWS Lambda it's fairly convoluted to like even get set up. And then once you have a bunch of serverless functions, you want all of those typically to be accessible from the same domain. And so that's what API Gateway allows you to do. API Gateway lets you put a bunch of AWS Lambda functions in front of that API Gateway. So now it behaves as if it was just one API with all of those endpoints, when in reality, each one of those endpoints is actually a separate Lambda function. Oh, well, yeah, I don't think I saw it either, Sej, but thank you. Thank you for the Prime. Cool. So yeah, you can look into that. But to answer your question, when and where, and then how do you create your own? Basically, if you're already building some kind of backend application and you potentially want to structure it in a way to where that it will easily scale in the future, you would use something like serverless, um, or like Lambda functions. Because the whole idea here, let's actually expand on serverless. Like serverless, like does not mean there is no server. There is absolutely a server. What it means is like it means we don't have to configure the server ourselves. Like we don't have to spin up a new VPS or anything like that. All of that is transparent to us. Basically, all we do is we give it a little piece of code to execute, and then the platform manages all of that. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So serverless framework, I guess, also helps with Cognito, and I think that's the thing is like, AWS has all of these offerings that you typically need to combine together. Like Cognito is their auth offering, and then API Gateway is how you take these Lambda functions and combine them into a single API. And Cognito you would put on top of that to make sure that your API has authorization on top of it. Serverless framework helps you with all of that. It helps you integrate all of that other stuff. A lot, yeah. So it is a lot to take in, but what I want to talk about what it is, and then I want to show you how easy it is if you were using a platform as a service. Because I'm gonna show you a Dino deploy. So easy. Like you don't even have to worry about all this stuff. Okay, yeah, so serverless doesn't mean there isn't a server. It means you don't have to configure the server. Yeah, we don't have to configure the server ourselves. We write a single request handler. So you should know what a request handler is to even able to understand like what serverless is. So for example, if you wrote an Express API, all of your routes are individual request handlers, right? Lambda functions basically allow you to, or serverless functions basically allow you to take each one of those individual request handlers and turn it in to its own serverless function that can basically be run on demand and scaled on demand. So we write a single request handler. This request handler is scaled on demand automatically as new requests come in automatically. So let's show an example, and we're gonna use Dino deploy because it's really easy, and they have like, I mean, there's probably, I'll just say this is what I've been exposed to, so that's why I think it's easy. Some of these others are probably just as easy, but I haven't worked with them, so I don't know how easy they are. So give me a second. I need to log into GitHub because it's been that long since I wrote code. I'm not telling America 2050. um, I mean, I guess I could tell you. I don't know. That's a potential attack vector. It's not supposed to be a secret, but if the one that I chose to use has some kind of leak or vulnerability, I guess it's all local to the phone, anyways. I don't know. I'm not going to tell you, regardless. Oh, cool. All right, so I'll show you Dino.dev. So Dino.dev is a way to do edge functions. Actually, if I log out really quick, I can show you their sales pitch as to like what they offer. So they offer GitHub integration. They have 35 different network locations. So this gets into edge, which is like a different concept. But when we talk about the edge, this is serverless functions running as close to a user as possible. So for instance, so we talked about, okay, we have the single request handler. That single request handler can now scale on demand automatically. So you give that request handler to one of these services. And now when requests start coming in, if all of a sudden a bunch of requests come in, it can spin up multiple instances. It can basically scale it infinitely, and then you only pay for what was used. Now, your serverless function might exist in a very specific region, right? You might have a serverless function that only exists in California, or only exists in Virginia, or only exists in Frankfurt, Germany. And so when a request comes in, there's going to be latency because any user that's on the other side of the world potentially has to make the request all the way to that server. Edge takes this a step further and basically puts your serverless functions all over the world now. So instead of just being in one data center, that same request handler that you deployed over here now gets distributed to all of the edge servers as well. So now your single edge function lives in California, it lives in Virginia, it lives in Dallas, Texas, it lives in Frankfurt, Germany, it lives all over the world. And now when a request comes in, the closest server, or the closest serverless server to the user making the request serves that request. So Edge basically just takes this a step further and makes it so that these little functions now live on the edge, or like as close to the user as possible. So that's what they mean when they say this runs in all 35 network locations. When you create a serverless function here, it's on the edge and will get served from the closest place. And then, yeah, exactly like Sauce is saying. So AKA this is a CDN. So if you're familiar with a content delivery network, same thing, but for serverless functions. I'll just say like CDN is for static files. So a content delivery network is a way of scaling your static file delivery so that it serves all over the world. Okay, so what does it mean to have like a single request handler? Let's build a little Dino deploy thing really quick. So on Dino deploy, I can create a new project. Let's just do the hello world. Let's see what happens. Now, exactly, America 2050. That's why I'm saying, like, this isn't exactly a beginner concept. There's a lot of underlying things here. Like, to even understand why something like serverless would be useful, you at least have to understand, like, HTTP and the request response cycle, and you also have to understand, like, client-server architecture, right? Because, like, basically what this is opposed to is it's opposed to a single server that runs all of our requests, like, I don't know. Okay, so this is our serverless function, and it's ready to go. So like literally anyone can go to this website and they can see Hello World. So right now in the chat, click that link and then tell me where you are in the world. It actually got served as close as possible to where you are in the world. Like we can so I'm guessing you probably got served that Hello World from Dallas, Texas. Ergon is in Florida. You probably also maybe you got like West Virginia. We can look at Dino deploy network locations. California, endpoints and regions. Oh, fascinating. So Dino deploy is built on top of AWS, but also Google Cloud Compute. So Germany. So yeah, if you're in Germany, you probably got served from Frankfurt. If you're in the US, you got served from one of these 3 locations. MTL? Aren't you in Canada? South Africa served from, served from Cape Town. Yeah. Belgium probably is going to Frankfurt. So yeah, they have these regions all over. And actually, I have no idea if my function is running on AWS or if it's running on Google Cloud Compute. And the thing is, I don't have to know that. They literally give me a spot to put my code, and now it gets deployed all over whenever that code changes. So let's change this to Hello Twitch, save it, deploy it. Now this is in the process of taking that code and then pushing it all over the world. So this literally just got pushed to 35 different network locations. Now, if you refresh that, you should see Hello Twitch. And that got served as fast as possible from you, from as close as possible to you. And it's pretty instant, right? Like I didn't have to wait for the deployment. Like this thing deployed very, very quickly. And so the Dino deploy playground is pretty interesting because it's like you can kind of see what's happening here. Like literally this code that I write to serve this response is exactly what you're getting back. In the real world, you typically will have like multiple serverless functions, and you need some way of like orchestrating those and like deploying multiple of your functions. And so there are frameworks and stuff that help with that. But this is as easy as it gets. If we go back to our projects, we could look at this one, REST API using Oak. So Oak is specific to Dino, but it kind of like emulates. What's this about? Why do I need the GitHub app? Oh, because it needs a whole repository. I see. So a playground is only like one single file, but an Oak app potentially has like multiple files. I'll show you the example we wrote for this one. We have an API that returns a list of trees. So you can pass in a query. What's the query? Filter. So you can pass in a filter. And then you can get all the trees that have that in them. So like you can do like the letter O or OA. This is a serverless function that's basically just responding with a filtered version of that array. Here's the thing though, we probably could make a little Dino deploy thing here with an Express API. Because Dino has a way of doing Express. Let's just find an example. Opine? Heck is Opine? I don't like that tutorial. How to with NPM. This is what I want. Possibly. Dino.serve. The thing is, I think I need some kind of Dino.serve with Express to integrate the two. What was the example? We did await app.serve. Yeah, I don't know if there would be a way to do that easily with Express. You could probably figure it out. But I think I've demonstrated the point enough here. Basically, this is our little serverless function that just responds with this. Your code can be more complex than this. You could connect to a database. You could run custom logic. You could do all kinds of things inside of this little request handler here. The other thing to show is like how to do this with Vercel, because that's also fairly easy. But Vercel, as far as I know, I don't think they have like a web editor for your code. You typically link it up to a Git repo. But like with Vercel, let me see if I can show this really quick. Yes, like this. So the way that they have you structure it, if you're not using Next.js, is you have a folder. Inside that folder, you have another folder called API, and then any file inside of that folder becomes a serverless function. And your serverless function, just like an express request handler, takes in the request, takes in the response, and then does something. In this case, it's just responding with an object with a bunch of properties on it. But the idea here is you would have multiple files. Each one becomes its own serverless function. And then when you deploy it to Vercel, it deploys each one of those as a separate serverless function. And behind the scenes, it's deploying it to AWS Lambda. All right, I think I've talked about this long enough. Have I answered your question? Yeah, so how do you create your own? You got multiple options. You can do Dino deploy. You can look into how it's done with Vercel. You can look into these other things like Firebase, Netlify, Cloudflare workers, all of these other things. I would honestly recommend, like if you're just getting into this, I would recommend try to use one of these, because if you try to do it directly on the service, it's going to be a lot harder. There's a lot more configuration that's involved. It's a lot more work than using these tools, which actually make it like very, very simple to do. So hopefully that helps. I guess I didn't really talk about like why you would do this. Like ultimately, it makes it really easy to scale. In a world where you have, like, let's say you have an Express app that lives on a server that needs to run Node.js, typically the way you would scale that is you would need to spin up a new server, a brand new server, or another process if you have like multiple CPUs on that server, and then Node would be running multiple instances on that single server. And then if that's not enough, you would need to create another server, and then you would need to have a load balancer in front of it. Like, the older way of scaling typically would require a lot more work. But the idea here is if you architect your app up front with this in mind, like basically decide that you're going to use serverless functions, you can very easily scale in the future without having to really even think about it. That's really the value proposition. But there have been a lot of articles written and people have shown like their use cases where like they decided to go serverless and in the end it actually ended up costing them more had they just done like a single VPS running their app or whatever else. But yeah, scale equals money. Yes, yes. So hopefully that answered your question. I need to use the restroom really quick, so we'll take a quick break. While I'm on break, I'm going to play you another outtake from the video. If you haven't seen the video, click that link. Go watch my video on YouTube. But this outtake is a question I answered from Ollie. So I will be right back. This next question comes from Ali, who dares me to... This next question comes from Ali, who dares me to drink the water. I'm not going to do that because I don't want to get sick. Now, there are some definitely rules and things you should go by if you're going to decide if you're going to drink water in the wilderness. But you would definitely want to filter it first. So also, like, this is actually a very large campground. So, I mean, I'm at the area where there are no campsites. But on the opposite side, there's like almost 60 campsites. And I can imagine there's a lot of things in this water that you don't want to drink just because there are so many humans nearby. But if you are going to drink the water, you can get this thing called a life straw. Basically, it has a carbon filter inside of it, and it'll filter the water. Or you can also use like iodine tablets. But I'm not going to do that because I packed my own water, and so this is clean bottled water that I transferred to my own bottle. I can trust that it's not going to have any weird stuff in it. And that's what I'm going to drink while I'm out here in the wild. So this next question comes from Florin, who asks, can you get a dev job with only knowing vanilla HTML, CSS, and JavaScript? So I used to work at a code school with Kyle, who I'm camping with. Hello. I'm back. I think there's like one other question that I didn't answer in the official video. Oh no, this one too from Codex. We'll play that one later. Cool. Welcome back, everyone. Let's answer some more questions. This one came from Fractal. Is there a recommended way to get into backend development? I'm not new to coding. I just don't know which language. You've done Node.js before. I don't know of a recommended way. I think just like anything else in programming, you just try it. Just jump right in. I think if you are like a front-end developer, it's easier to get into Node.js because it is JavaScript, and you might already be familiar with JavaScript. But there's more to learn than just the backend framework or library that you're going to use to like build APIs or build backend things. You have to learn about databases. You potentially learn about like deployment and scaling and stuff like that. So I don't have a recommended way. The way I did it was just start, just try it, try to build my own stuff, and learn as I go, similar to how I learned anything else. But I would if you're looking, let's say you want to get into it right now, I would recommend try and build an API, right? So if you already have an app that talks to some API, potentially try to build your own version of that API. And then the app that's talking to that API can now talk to your app. You could also build like an API proxy. But my recommendation is just start, try and build things and just start. Yeah. Okay. Physitronic asked the question, how do you figure out encoding some custom solutions that are specific and unable to find them in Stack Overflow or on forums? I would like to try to package together Java in Quick into a WAR file that I have with Vanilla.js and Java. Do you mean like Quick.js, like the new Quick thing? I don't know if you're still here, Physitronic. I feel like I have really bad answers today because my answer to this is just do it. I mean, there have been so many times where I couldn't find the answer to what I was trying to do on Stack Overflow or anywhere else, and I kind of just had to figure it out. And like there have been times in my career where I literally have the same, I like Googled the same thing over and over for like multiple weeks, just trying to see if new results would pop up. And I would use tools in Google search. I mean, in these days I use DuckDuckGo, but you can do things like show me only things that were posted in the past day or the past week, just because I was trying to see if anybody else would talk about that thing. But I think the other aspect here is to break down what you're trying to do into smaller solvable problems that you can find on Stack Overflow on forums. So in this case, you want to try to package together Java and Quick. Somebody probably hasn't done it before because Quick is new, but you might look into, all right, how do you package things into a WAR file? That's like a different problem to solve. And then you can start to go from there and find similar examples. Like maybe somebody has packaged Next.js in a WAR file. I don't even know if that's a thing you would want to do, but that would be similar. That would be closer to what you're trying to do. So maybe if you find an example of that could help you there. But yeah, that's really my advice is you just gotta do everything you can to figure it out. Keep searching the same things over and over again if you don't find results. And then also break it down into smaller problems that actually are more Googleable or people have talked about on Stack Overflow before. Cool. All right. Let's try to answer this one. I want to move from web development to machine learning and data science. I don't know Python. What are my other options? So I'm not in machine learning or data science. I've done things that are tangential to it. So, like I've done like a lot of data visualization. I've done things of like cleaning data and stuff like that, but I've never officially been a data scientist or like done things with machine learning. But I know Python is everywhere. So like, I mean, it's possible to do machine learning and data science without Python. Like there's actually TensorFlow JS and Sej. Thank you for the prime. There it is. Thank you. 6 months of CJ. Wait, is that a 6-month reset? What? That's a lot of resubs, Sej. Thank you for the 6 months. But yeah, TensorFlow JS would allow you to do machine learning with JavaScript if that's something you want to do. And I'm sure you could find similar libraries for any other programming language, but Python is where it's at. Like all of the libraries are in Python. You typically also want to do a lot of like data manipulation and data visualization. There's a lot of really good libraries in Python that do all of that. Of course, you could find things in other programming languages, but in machine learning and data science, it's really hard to avoid Python. So my suggestion is learn Python and learn the libraries associated with ML and data science. If you don't want to, TensorFlow JS is a way to do machine learning like with Node.js. There's also ML5.js. So this is written on top of TensorFlow, and this lets you do machine learning in the web browser. So it has a bunch of like ready to go images and models that you can pull from to do like ML in the browser. So yeah, I haven't heard of ML.net, but I'm guessing that's a way of doing machine learning. I don't want to go to that website. Yeah, machine learning made for .net. Cool. But yeah, I don't know what it's built on top of or what it actually uses. But yeah, what is ML.net? Oh, it's created by Microsoft. That's cool. Yeah, but it's a potential another option. I think like in the .net world, there are a lot of options for data visualization and stuff like that. But but yeah, if you're familiar with C#, this might be something you lean towards if you don't want to learn Python as well. Yeah. SC May says, "Do I have a beginner course for programming, like libraries and such?" I don't. I need to. I just haven't spent the time creating one, but I need to. I mean, that's what a lot of Microsoft stuff is that's why they do it. But yeah, I am Xavier. Hopefully that helped. Let's see what else. Yeah, let's answer this one. Wait. We'll answer this one, and then we'll also answer Stas's question, and then we'll go from there. Winter Not Found says, "Do you have any videos discussing getting a job in web development? I'm being let go, support engineer, and I'm looking to switch paths." I guess what you're really asking about is like career advice, or are you also asking just like how do you learn web development? Because I do have some YouTube videos that kind of help with that. So if you check out this playlist over on YouTube, the first video talks about why I think web development is potentially one of the most lucrative things and like most widespread things in terms of programming, because there's a lot of different kinds of programming you could do. And then this second video talks about places where you can learn to code online for free. So that might help. I don't really have anything specific on like career advice. Anything I do have is like probably lost in like a 2 or 3 hour code Q&A stream where I was giving some kind of like very specific career advice. But hopefully that will help you. If you check out that playlist, it has at least ways to learn web development. Because learning web development is different than getting a job in web development. Because first you have to learn it, build things with it, understand it well, and then try to find a job, which is a completely, it's like a whole other set of skills. Like you need to have a good resume, you need to have a good portfolio, you need to practice interviewing, you need to potentially practice whiteboarding interviews and programming interviews. So like it's a long process. The first step is to learn and build, though. Okay, Stas says, why does the useState hook not have a callback to track when setState function ends? It's hard to implement under the hood, or is it missing? Um, wait, what do you, what? I don't know if you're still here, Stas, but do you have an example of this? Like, do you have a specific thing that you're trying to do? Because we could spin up a little React. Oh, I mean, we have a React app. We could put this in a React app really quick. So you built some stuff, currently teaching yourself more about building type-safe APIs to use with Nux. Awesome. You're way more advanced than I thought. So my videos probably won't even help you. I think the only advice I can give right now is try to build out a portfolio. So I'm guessing you don't have a degree in computer science but you probably do have an IT degree, like if you were working elsewhere in the IT industry. But if you want to get hired as a programmer or as a web developer, you need to be able to show them that you can do it. So I would say start working potentially on a project portfolio. And you need something to show potential employers that you know what you're doing. And basically like take the projects you've built and like put them into something that's easily showable to places you're going to be applying to. And then from there, you can start practicing interviews. There are places online where you can do like mock interviews. There are Discord communities where you can get mock interviewed by people, because that's one thing you're going to want to practice as well. Anything you should avoid putting in your portfolio? I think you should put anything in there that demonstrates your skill set and also your expertise. So like, yeah, I would avoid putting to-do apps in there if you can. Like if you have other things, because to-do apps typically they're for yourself, right? A to-do app was you learning how to do the thing, but what you should typically do is like take those things you learned in that to-do app and then build your own app that incorporates those ideas. And that's something I would put in the portfolio, because that shows that you're not, you know how to build things for yourself. You're not just following a tutorial. But yeah. And I think that's some other advice there, is just like, try not to build generic things. Like you could have followed a tutorial on how to build a to-do app, but if you modify it slightly. So instead of a to-do app, which like is marking things that you need to do as done, or like removing them from the list, you could have an app that's like movies you want to watch, which is slightly different than a to-do app, but now it's like a list of to-dos that are movies you want to watch, which is slightly different and a bit more original. Yeah, so like cinema management, like movie management, like e-commerce stores are like can be a bit more complex, and a lot of times, like you don't want to build e-commerce from scratch. You typically integrate with like existing things, but yeah, I think showing that you know how to integrate OAuth is a good thing to have in your portfolio, and maybe you highlight that, right? So like in your portfolio, you say, this app I built specifically uses OAuth, and this is the code I used to implement it, and that kind of thing. But yeah, okay, so Stas, I think they mentioned they'll give an example later. Okay. Thank you, Stas. Says just asking, why is HTML good, JavaScript is good, but CSS is an unintelligible mess? I don't know. I would say they're all kind of a mess. Honestly, HTML is like the only like structured thing and predictable thing out of all of these. But and also I guess it depends. Like these days, there are like some very specific CSS that you can use to get to do the things that you want it to do. Right? Like most of the time we are building custom layouts for our websites, and these days if you just use Flexbox or Grid, it pretty much does what you expect it to do. The unpredictable things, I guess, are like the box model or whatever. Like really understanding border versus width, and like how that accounts into like what gets displayed on the page. Those can be the tricky parts. But I don't know. My answer is stick to Flexbox and Grid, and you can do most things. Yeah, and you're welcome, Sesh. The thing is, even with Tailwind, though, you still have to understand the basics of CSS. And even with Tailwind, you would end up using like I would hope like Flexbox or CSS Grid or whatever else. Yeah. HTML is only predictable when browsers implement it all the same way, but they should these days. These days they should, right? Buno Kazooie or Buno Kazooie is saying, when was the last time you had to rewrite for performance? What was the scenario? I didn't, and I never have. And I've been programming professionally for over 12 years. And in general, I've been programming for over 15 years. And never in my life have I had to rewrite something for performance. Which is why I typically don't care about when people talk about performance. And I don't do performance comparisons because they're like, I'm not saying that it's not important, but there are very specific jobs and scenarios and use cases where you do need to care about performance. And I've never had to do any of that. And I have had a successful career, I guess, if you want to call it successful. So yeah, I've never had to rewrite something for performance. Honestly, that's a lie though. I like little things, but not enough to care. And I think also why I'm giving an answer like this is because I'm tired of hearing about it, right? So, and I think that's the thing, right? Like, you see these anytime a YouTube video mentions performance and it's about programming, instant 10x on the views, right? I don't know. And thank you, Programmer Jeff. I like my shirt. Let's do a quick plug for the merch. Merch.coding.garden. You too can get yourself a shirt with the word code on it. There, it's all the way at the bottom. It's interesting to watch, but you don't care to do it in your code. Yeah. Have you heard about Bun? I have. And I bet they're doing good things. But I think that's the thing that kind of like irked me early on about Bun is like everyone was like freaking out about the performance when most people actually didn't care. I'm not saying no one cared. I'm saying most people wouldn't actually have to care about the performance. Like, I think isn't it something like Cloudflare workers are using Bun? They care about the performance because they need to scale and they're like hosting people and stuff like that, and they want their functions to run fast. But anyone else, they probably don't care as much. Yeah. Last time I had to do it was a large list of things in Angular. Yeah, I think honestly, if I'm trying to think about like where in my career did I actually need to do it, I think ultimately it was like I didn't have to performance tune. I just wrote it one way and then realized, oh, I've got a million rows in this table. I can't just render them all at the same time. So I'm going to add a library that does list virtualization. And that was the solution. I didn't have to do it myself. I just like added a library. And then one time I was implementing an animation. This was like for a personal project. I was implementing an animation of characters. Like the characters would like flip and then land on a specific character. And I tried to do it in Vue.js. And it was like really slow because it uses the virtual DOM. So I was like, let's try this new Svelte thing. And I just implemented it with Svelte and it instantly worked. So like in my experience, it's not having to like narrow in and fine tune. It's like just rewrite it with something else or use a different library and it just works better. I don't know. There's weird stuff when you want to customize input elements. Oh yeah, you're talking about HTML cross browser. I guess this is true, and I think that's the thing that I potentially don't think about a lot is that because I have a background in computer science, and I did learn about data structures and algorithms and like Big O and that those kinds of things. I feel like those are potentially always at the back of my head when I'm implementing solutions. I think that's the other thing is like when I'm implementing a front end app, I almost never use array.find or I guess yeah. So almost never use array.find because in a lot of scenarios it makes more sense to put something into a map or like a hash or a dictionary for like constant lookups versus having to search through an array every time. And I'm not talking about like, and what's up, Taco Bandit? Like I'm not talking about map being faster than any other method. Basically, like don't use like a linear search method when a hash lookup would be faster. And so I think like that's the other thing is like a lot of times I just default to that so I don't have to worry about it later on. Yeah. Oh man, sorry to hear that, GPT. And many times a quadratic solution is good enough. Yeah. So Taco Bandit says, I had to do some performance tuning, but it was the queries to Mongo. So we were using a lot of lookups that are slow, so we needed to move away from that. Yeah. Yeah, and the thing is, like I said, I never have done. I've probably, if I dig deep enough, I could think of some things I've done, but yeah. Um, yeah. Use exclamation mark ask, Audie, so I don't lose your question, but it'll show up on this site if you use exclamation mark ask. Thanks for the hydrate. It's not a thing until it's a thing. I agree with that. Have I seen the new stuff in Svelte 4? I haven't. We'll probably upgrade. That's my answer for that. All right. This question comes from Finder. How do you prepare for a talk about something you made? I'm asking is that I have to prepare for a talk about a program I made that looks for files in an encrypted hard drive. Hey, Taco Bandit. You're very kind. Thank you for the gifts. No, this is just an invisible cup. That's all that is. Oh, thanks, Taco Bandit. How do I prepare for a talk on something I've made? And so I think that initially when you asked the question, I thought you meant like a meetup talk or like a conference talk, but I think you're just going to be presenting to like your coworkers, right? Or maybe to like management or to like a class, like to other students. So yeah, let me just give you some tips on like presenting. First of all, live demos almost always go wrong. So if you want to show the thing working, take screenshots and potentially do a screen recording. So that way during your presentation, maybe during your presentation, you're like, all right, I'm going to try to do a live demo, but if the live demo doesn't work, have your screenshots and screen recording as a backup, ready to go. Because it almost always happens that like things just don't work out. The demo doesn't work. So if you have that video you can play, people can still see what you were trying to demonstrate. I think up front you probably want to make like a bulleted list of like these are the problems I had to solve. I guess you could almost treat it like an answer to an interview question. So if you've heard of the STAR method, situation, task, action, result, or situation, task, action. What's the R stand for? But that basically kind of gives you a story arc for talking about your project. So like, what was the situation you were presented with? I needed to write a program that encrypts specific files on the system because of Sana. Thank you for the 5. It's very kind. It says thanks to watching your videos and streams. I got into web development, and in October I stopped my first software job. Nice, without a CS degree. That's awesome. Thanks for the great content. Keep up the work. Thank you, Sana. I appreciate that. But yeah, what's the situation? What was the task? Right, this is exactly what I did. The action. This is how I did it, and then the result is we now have a program that can encrypt files on the hard drive. So. Basically, you can find various methods for like telling a good story about the thing that you did. So hopefully that helps Finder. And also the tip about having backups, like screen recordings or video recording. Hopefully that helps too. All right, this one from Harsh says sometimes. Okay, yeah. So it says situation, task, action, result. Sometimes referred to as SORA: situation, objective, action, result, aftermath. Yeah, something like that. But that shit, honestly, the thing about good presentations and like good talks, typically, like, one of the good things, you can have various kinds of presentations and talks, but one of the things that typically always goes over fairly well with a crowd is if you have a story, right? So like the reason we watch movies and we watch TV shows and even these days like YouTube videos is because they're entertaining and they keep us engaged, typically with some kind of story arc. right? Like you have the situation that you're presented with, you kind of like see the journey, and then you see some kind of resolution at the end of it all. And so people like watching things like that. So if you're giving a talk or even like a presentation for work, that can help you as well. All right, Harsh says, sometimes I feel that I've wasted a lot of time in the past and I feel regret and not able to concentrate on today. What should I do? First of all, just remind yourself that you can't change the past. So like, I feel like most people have regrets, right? Most people have things that they wanted to do but didn't do or did do and they feel like they shouldn't have done. But at least right now, we don't have the technology to go back and change the past. Or at least it's not accessible to people like us. Maybe large governments have time travel technology they use to fix things, but we don't have that, right? So we're living. Time moves forward. You can't change the past. You can learn from the past, though. I think that's one of the main things. Is you basically try to take those feelings of regret and turn them into something actionable, right? Because those regrets you have are potential learnings, right? They're things you did that you feel were wrong or you feel like you shouldn't have done. But now you can treat that like a learning. You can say, like, going forward, I'm not going to do that because I learned the hard way, right? I learned that if I do this specific thing, something bad's going to happen. Or if I don't do something, like, yeah, you just have to move on from that. And so, yeah, my advice is focus on what you can do now to change things going forward versus feeling regret about the past. That's the advice that I can give. Yeah, Noctate says, I should have talked to that girl in 8th grade. I mean, that's something that's like that's something that's hard to think about, oh, I should have done it or I couldn't have done it. Like the thing I think you can always take something and spin it though, right? Like the thing that I think about is like, oh, I should have talked to that girl in 8th grade. Where is that person now, right? Like they probably have a life of their own. And like, I guess the regret you could have is like, oh, well, they could have had a life with me. Well, do you really want that? I mean, I don't know. I don't know. Live in the present, learn from your mistakes. And yeah, that's all the advice I can give. Thank you, Harsh. Thanks for the question. And like Sej says, we love you. No regrets. Keep moving. Do your best. Yeah. What's my favorite web framework right now? I guess Svelte. Always just assume they're in prison. I think so I think that's the thing. If you have regrets about things you don't know the details over, just make the details up to make it way worse than it actually is. So like, if you have a regret that you didn't ask that person out in 8th grade, now you can just be like, yeah, well, they're actually in prison. And so it's a good thing that you didn't ask them out. I am Salim says, thanks for the question. He's not alone. Yeah. Yeah. Just make up a backstory and then you don't have to feel bad about it. All right. I like Svelte. Svelte is nice. And I want to learn more about Feathers version 5, the latest Feathers. Also, Platformatic seems cool. I kind of want to dig into this, but I haven't used it. It just seems cool. But if I had to pick a favorite, I guess I'd go with Svelte just because I use it the most. Yeah. Platform Addict? No, Platformatic. Matteo Colino is the creator. He came on the stream a couple months back to talk about it, and then they launched it at JS Nation. It seems cool. Any thoughts about React Roots 2.0? I haven't thought about it at all. So if you're not familiar, React Roots is a course I did on React and TypeScript. I think the main issue was I set aside a lot of time to run the course live, and then the participants in the course didn't really need my help outside of giving reviews for their exercises. So there was like a lot of time I set aside for doing the live course that was just me sitting around doing nothing. Like if I did it again, I want to make sure that I am using my time wisely. But there's a potential course on both sides of this, right? Like I could probably do a course on things you need to know before you even learn React and TypeScript, like this stuff. And then I could also do a course of what do you learn after you know the basics of React and TypeScript, like how do you advance from there. But I haven't thought about it because it's a lot of work. I don't know. I want to make all my money streaming. Just gift subs, donate, and I could just do this for the rest of my life. Yeah, exactly, default. It's like it's something that I can't predict, which is hard because it's like I set aside like a certain number of hours in the day where I'm like, all right, I'm going to be available for everyone, which means like I don't want to plan on doing anything else because I want to be available to answer questions. But if I do that and then they don't have questions, now I'm just sitting there doing nothing and like I'm not optimizing my time. I don't know. All right. What else? I know you're not Angular main, but what do you think about this? Built-in control flow. A control flow syntax for Angular. Whoa, did they steal the syntax from Svelte and Mustache? Wow. I think it's fine. I think it's fine. So, some people might hate this syntax and like prefer like ngIf or whatever is built into Angular right now. But I think one of the cool things about templates and Vedith, thank you for the resub. The cool things about syntax like this is that the compiler can actually optimize the template, whereas it's harder for a compiler to optimize like directives on an element. So it seems fine. Seems fine. I think ultimately I've come around to the Svelte syntax. I think it's cool, and the idea that the template can be optimized more easily now is pretty interesting too. Cool. Pretty soon we're gonna see that syntax in React. That would be pretty funny if we did. All right, this just seems interesting. Let's see what this question is. Can you help settle an argument between me and my girlfriend? She believes hiring a mid-level C++ dev that doesn't have the 4 years of experience in C++ is going to produce junior level code. I argue that a mid-level developer can pick up the language fairly quickly and produce quality code to that of a mid-level. What do you think? Hiring a mid-level C++ dev that doesn't have 4+ years of experience in C++. Oh yeah. Here's the thing. When I was in a position to hire people, I care about like the qualities of a teammate first before I start to care about like their level of like what they can code. Because here's the thing, like it depends on the person for this, right? So like personally, I think I could get up to speed. It wouldn't be instant, right? It would take me some time to get up to speed, but I'm the kind of employee, I'm the kind of teammate, I'm the kind of person that does everything I can to produce the best possible work, which means I'm going to be very like aware of the fact that I'm not at the same level as the people around me and I need to level up. And I need to use their code, their existing code as an example when I'm writing my own code. And I need to make sure that I follow all of the guidelines before going into a code review and different stuff like that. So like there's a certain kind of developer that I think could do this. There's also a certain kind of developer that I think would have a very hard time and would potentially produce junior level code. So I think it depends. I think it depends on the person, and ultimately you should hire someone that you would enjoy working with, kind of regardless of their skill set. Now, obviously, skill set is important, but I think that comes second. And if you find someone that you think is going to be reliable, you think they're going to be a good teammate, they get along well with everyone, then it might actually be worth slowing the team down for a little bit while they get caught up. That's yeah. I'm not here to settle that argument. I'm here to say there's way more to it than just do we think they're going to be able to produce production level code. Now, I don't think they're going to produce junior level code. I think it's going to but it absolutely will take some time for them to get up to speed. Because yeah, like even personally, like if I were to go to a project doing C++, like I would, um, I'm aware of my own deficiencies. Like I know there's so much that like I know how to program, but I don't know like what are the best practices, what are the things that we need to do in like a modern C++ code base. Like those are the kinds of things that you have to learn. So yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. It also depends on their past experience too. Like, if what were those 4 years of experience doing? Right? Was it in low level code? Was it in something completely different? So, yeah, I'm not here to settle your argument. I'm here to tell you um, there are other things you need to think about as well. Yeah, Limode says the best practices in C++ are not to use modern C++. Yeah, that the answer is to use Rust, right? Don't use C++. I don't know. Should we make a new JavaScript framework called Thick to compete with Svelte? I don't want to compete with Svelte. Svelte is cool. Svelte has like solved a lot of the things. So why would we want to compete with it? But I see what you're saying. It's a joke, right? It's a joke. I don't know. Nice. Hey, what? Oh, you said you were gonna get Five Guys, didn't you, Sej? But now you're gonna get Domino's. Um. All right. Do exclamation mark ask, Rich, so that it shows up on this side, just so I don't lose your question, because I'm answering some of these other ones first. All right. Can I look at this? Yeah, this got asked a while ago. I don't know if they're still here. Xenogenesis. Need help with error, module not found, no module named application when deploying to AWS static elastic beanstalk. So it looks like this is Python code. And you define the application here. Where's the actual error message? No module named application. I think it would be this line of code here. This is the one that's breaking, I think. But I have no idea. I don't do a lot of Python. but I would imagine it's either this line of code or this line of code, or somewhere in here, or here. Your problem is in this general area. I can't help you. So yeah. Will Express take me far enough without other frameworks? Sure, but Express is very bare bones. There's only so much that it does. So, yeah, you can do a lot with Express. And I mean, I've built entire production APIs that are still in use that were built with Express. But these days, there are more full-featured frameworks that take away a lot of the boilerplate and a lot of like the manual stuff. So, yeah. But yeah, you can do most things. All right. Yeah. think about HX? What is HX? How do I find it? If I just search the web for HX, will I find it? In what context? JavaScript? HTMX? You talking about HTMX? This? I don't, let me know if you're still here, Gigi, because I actually don't know what you're talking about. All right, Daddy Ray has a question. I'm looking to use an external database for my Node.js project and moving away from the JSON files. What's better, Mongo or Google Sheets API? I tried Mongo and had problems between MongoDB and Mongoose. I would say probably Mongo is going to be better. Because like Google Sheets, I don't know what their SDK is like. And also, like, eventually, if you want to move beyond, because so I know Daddy Ray has been working on like a bot, I think for Twitch chat or a Discord bot, and they were using like a flat JSON file. I mean, I think if you want to go beyond that, like, eventually build apps outside of this bot that you've been working on, Mongo is probably going to have the most crossover. Like, if you decide to build an app outside of that, like, it probably makes sense to choose something like Mongo. Yeah, you could do CouchDB. I've never done CouchDB, but it is a NoSQL database that has like an HTTP API. So that's a potential option. But yeah, in my opinion, and if I was building it, I would go with a database. So I would go with Mongo or some other NoSQL database. I probably wouldn't go with Google Sheets. You could, but I think you might even run into issues there with like OAuth and like just trying to get the right privileges to write to the sheet. But I guess it also depends on your use case. Like if you have a specific Google Sheet that you want non-technical users to be able to modify or change, then maybe that does make sense. But otherwise, you would have to build some kind of front end for people to be able to change things. But yeah. But yeah, I would go with Mongo. I mean, you can also look at, I don't know if you were using like KneeDB, but KneeDB is file based, but you're not actually. I think these days LowDB is probably more popular, right? Yeah. This behind the scenes uses JSON files, but the actual methods that you call are fairly straightforward. But yeah, that's my advice. Try to figure it out with Mongo and Mongoose. All right, this question comes from Adi. They say, I'm a self-taught front-end developer, but where I live, there are not really any opportunities for a junior developer. I thought about volunteering for some nonprofit, but opportunities I found required you to have job experience in order to be a volunteer. That seems weird. It's like, we want you to volunteer, but you have to have experience. But that's unfortunate. Okay, so I'm kind of stuck in this vicious cycle where I would need some volunteering experience for a job, but would need a job experience for volunteering. What would you recommend for guys like me? Yeah, I think honestly, anyone that's trying to get a job in web development or whatever else, I think the easiest thing you can do is just work on personal projects and make sure you have a good portfolio. But yeah, it is the old catch-22. It's like you want to work a job, but the job requires experience, so you can't find a job to get that experience. Yeah, it's definitely a thing. And in the development world, like having your, I would not recommend lying. You can if you want to. And honestly, people have gotten jobs that way, where they lie about their past experience, but somebody's gonna find out eventually, and that's never ends well. So yeah, I think the easiest thing you can do is start to build out a portfolio of projects, right? So they're gonna say, well, do you have a year of experience with JavaScript? And you can say, well, not working a job, but you can see this code base where I've been working on for the past year and a half. And this is the thing that I've built, and this is what I've done. So that's typically why a project, like most newer developers that don't have a computer science degree or haven't worked jobs before, that's why they have a portfolio, is to kind of show that you know how to code and you know how to do the thing. So yeah, number one, you should have a portfolio and be working on projects for your portfolio if you can't find other things to do. And that should be one of your main priorities. And then also you could try to do some open source contribution, right? So there's quite a few YouTube videos out there on how to find an open source project to contribute to. And a lot of projects that are structured well will actually have issues that say good for beginners or like good first issue. So you could spend your spare time working on those, and then now you do have some experience, right? So like you weren't getting paid for it because it's like open source work. But if you potentially have a spot in your portfolio where you can mention like these are all the libraries that I contributed to and these are the PRs that I closed, and you can like literally link to those, that could help out as well. But yeah, it's tough. It's tough out there. So that would be my advice. Make sure you have a portfolio, work on portfolio projects, and then also potentially try some open source contribution. Yeah. Yeah, and I think Kokoyu is absolutely right. So a lot of these jobs that you're potentially applying to, if they say you need 1 year of experience or 2 years of experience, you could still apply, and you could just say, well, my experience working on these portfolio projects was a year experience. Like I wasn't getting paid for it. It wasn't a job, but I do have that experience. So you're not technically lying. It's just you don't have the professional experience, which may not be required. So yeah, hopefully that helps, Adi. All right. Gigi had another question. Yeah, of course, Adi. And again, hopefully that helps. Best way to learn and understand Angular 2. Currently working on some old front-end code, and I can't keep my motivation. Honestly, I mean, as far as I know, the Angular docs are where it's at. Like everything about Angular is in like these are very expansive docs that just keep going, and there's just so much in these docs. So I would recommend the Angular documentation. I don't know if they have any like online communities like Discord and stuff like that, but yeah, that's what I would recommend. And in terms of keeping your motivation, I don't have any advice on that. It's just try your best. Try your best. All right, Programmer Jeff has a thing. I'm just learning web dev, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript after like 15 years. Any advice on some of the new APIs or kits? I've heard a lot of buzzwords like Svelte, React Node. I know it probably depends on purpose or projects, but just to make dazzling websites, brief answer is okay. Sure. Yeah, it's okay. Let me rephrase the question. You're someone that has done development before, like 15 years ago, and you're trying to learn again, and there's a lot of stuff, and you don't know what you should focus on. I would say these days, React is kind of everywhere. And if you can equate that to 15 years ago, like 15 years ago, people were building websites, and they were almost always including, I guess it was probably less than 15 years ago, but almost always including things like jQuery or Lodash. These days, when someone decides to build a website, they're building it with React, or they're building it with Svelte, or they're building it with Vue, or they're building it with Angular. Like that's basically the choice you pick when you're building a web application. And I think that's the other thing to consider is 15 years ago, there were not a lot of web apps. There are a lot of websites, right? And so a website is typically mostly static content, very informational. Think of it like a brochure website. It has some information about a thing, but it's not very interactive. That's a website. These days, people are building web apps or web applications. And so they're highly interactive, and things on the page are constantly changing, and like new data is coming in, and like different things like that. And that's why people are choosing like React, Svelte, or Vue. They allow you to build web applications, right? So basically you have a single web page where all of the stuff happens inside that web page, similar to how when you have a mobile app, everything is happening in like contained within that mobile app. So I think that's one of the major differences from websites back then versus websites these days is most of the time it's not just a website, it is a web application. So I think you can start there. If you're trying to just build a website, look into Astro. I think that's the advice that I'll give you is like, if you're just trying to build websites, look into Astro because this lets you build websites very easily. And once you start looking into the documentation, you can pick and choose. You can use Astro components and they have docs on that. Or if you want to like learn the basics of React, you can use React components in your Astro or Astro app, or you can use Svelte components or Vue components. So if you're just trying to build websites, look into something like Astro. Yeah, it depends on the project. I guess I don't have a good answer for you because then it gets into, well, if you're trying to build a web app, then you start to think about, well, does it need to be server rendered or is it just a single page application? And that's where something like Next.js gets involved. I don't know. I will say it's a really tough time to get back into web development right now because like even I'm not sure of all the Next.js stuff. So hopefully that helped, Programmer Jeff. I don't even know if I answered your question. I want to keep moving. All right, this one, we answered that one. What's up, St. Lilek? Good to see you. Yeah, we'll answer Winter Not Found, and then we'll answer Rich's question. So Winter Not Found says, what's your opinion on so many jobs requiring React when there are other frameworks, say Vue, that have so few opportunities, at least from what I've seen? Yeah, it depends on where you are in the world, because Vue is actually pretty popular in China and in parts of Europe as well. React is basically, it's just one, right? So like that's why like a lot of companies are hiring for it, is because it's easier to hire for it because so many people are doing it and have experience with it. Doesn't mean it's better. It just means that it's more prevalent, which also means there's more libraries, there's more potential like courses and documentation to learn about it. So that's really why you see it in most places. But I will say it's not the only thing, and you can find jobs that are doing Vue or that are doing Svelte or even Angular. But it's just like React has basically it's past hype. It's here to stay, and so many people have adopted and used it that for a lot of companies, it's easier to hire to build things with React because there are so many devs available and so many libraries and various things that you can use with it available. So yeah, that's that. And also people and companies are transitioning to things like Vue and Svelte, but React is here to stay. Okay. Rich says, what's up, CJ and community? Hello, welcome in. I was doing the Mimo dev program. I haven't heard of this. What is it? Mimo. It's a Mimo. Become a professional developer and get hired. Okay, so it's like a coding boot camp. Cool. But now they're closing. I won't be able to finish on time. Gonna search out other programs. Any thoughts? So yeah, I'm not even familiar with what exactly they offer. Let me know, Rich, were you doing the front end or the full stack one? Front end? Okay. So they cover all this stuff. Yeah, let me give you some options. So first of all, the Odin project, completely free. Yeah, so there's a few we'll mention. So first of all, Odin project, it's all self-paced. If you go to the curriculum, you can look at, it technically says, well, actually, I guess if you go to foundations, does this cover React? It doesn't, but this does have foundations in JavaScript, and then the full stack track Does this? Yeah, the full stack check covers React like in here. So this potentially could be a place to go um, to finish your learning journey. Like I'm sure parts of the earlier part of the curriculum you could probably skip, um, but then you could like dive into the JavaScript section. But this is completely free, but it's also self-paced. I think if you're a good self-starter, like if you're okay with you're okay with motivating yourself and you have the diligence to go through and actually do what these articles say to do. Like this says, here are some resources. You should probably spend the time looking at those resources. Or like it will give you an exercise or a project. You should actually take the time to implement that project, right? Because if you don't and you just like read each article and you're like, I'm done, you're not actually going to learn the thing. So I think that's one of the main things with the Odin projects is it's really up to you to spend the time making sure you go through all of the resources and do all of the projects and everything else. Yeah, Full Stack Open is another thing. It's also free. Isn't it like University of Helsinki or something like that? Yeah. I don't know if that's the right name. It is Helsinki. I don't know if it's some university in Finland. um, but they also have a full curriculum with all this stuff. So that's another thing to look at. Yeah, absolutely look at 100 Devs. Now, for a while, this was live on Twitch. I don't know if it's starting up again, but you should definitely go drop a follow on Learn with Leon. For a while, he was streaming basically the lessons, and they were free to attend. And they had a Discord where you could get help and do the exercises and stuff like that. Does anyone know what is the... Someone was telling me about it. Like someone... Oh, here we go. Is this it? The 100 Devs Progress Tracker. This might be it. Anybody that's with 100 Devs, let me know in the chat. But basically, the only way to consume 100 Devs right now would be to go over to YouTube. So if you look at Leon's channel on YouTube and you look at playlists, there specifically is these two playlists that have like all of the lessons that he taught live on Twitch. So you could watch those, but you'd have to figure out where to get all the resources and everything else. I believe one of the 100 Devs people made this website, and it makes it so that you can actually track your progress through all of the lessons. And then like it lists out this seems like it's it. This has a lot of stuff too. So you can check this out. Like this basically takes all of the 100 Dev stuff and wraps it up into a curriculum of sorts. So it's a bit easier to track what you're doing. So check that out. And then also there's a free code camp. So this is completely free. They have the web design certification. I believe this does like the basics of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And then there's the front end library, a front end course that actually takes you through eventually React. So yeah, free code camp is another option. And then if you're looking for another boot camp to pay for, I don't have any advice on that. I would just search the web. Search for like coding boot camp reviews. And yeah, I don't know if Course Report is good. Maybe Switch Up. Is Switch Up specific to coding boot camps? Yeah. Fascinating. So yeah, you can like look at this article. I actually don't even know what Switch Up is, but the reason that I'm like hesitant of it is it doesn't even mention Turing School. Turing School of Software and Design. So this school coding school originated in Colorado, but now they're completely online. It's not good that their website is loading so slow though. There we go. So, they're not in the list, but the reason I mention it is because my wife works there. So I don't know. Check it out. And then this list did have Hack Reactor here. And I used to work at a company called Galvanize. But Galvanize acquired Hack Reactor, and then they replaced the entire Galvanize education program with Hack Reactor. So, like, I can't recommend this, but you could look into it because it's somewhat related to the company that I used to work for. But yeah. Basically, do your own research. That's all I have to say. And honestly, a lot of the, like, if you're for a front end course or front end boot camp, you can self teach, and that's basically like why I was giving all of those resources. Like, if you're diligent enough and like you are like you've got the drive to do it, you actually can completely self teach. Now you're gonna miss out on like instructor feedback and also potentially like teamwork. But there are other ways to find those things outside of a coding bootcamp. Like, you can find mentors online. I think the 100 Devs community has a Discord. It's probably you can probably find people there if you want to like form a team and like practice working on a team and stuff like that. So I would say, yeah, like if you want to go the self-taught route, it's going to be harder, but it will be free. And then yeah, do your own research for boot camps. Thanks for the question. All right, we're coming up on the end of stream here, so let's do a lightning round and go on from there. I don't know what they were asking, so we'll go from here. Do I have any advice for npm build production on every merge to Manster main branch and auto tagging in the repo? The only advice I have would be look into GitHub Actions, because GitHub Actions are going to let you do those things within a GitHub repo. If you're on GitHub, if you're not on GitHub, then search for the things specific to whatever you're using. Oh yeah, I guess. I mean, I have a Discord. The issue is like it's not very active these days, but we do have a place where you can ask for help. And thank you, Chase, or Rich, or not, Rich Casey. Sorry, I didn't mean to call you Chase. Thank you, Rich. Thank you for that Prime. Appreciate it. Yeah, we have a Discord. I'm not as active in there as I should be, and that's basically why I'm not talking about it. But join the Discord. We do have a help forum. We do have a channel called Find a Pair. I just don't know how active it is the thing. What's up, Shulman? Yeah, my advice is look into GitHub Actions. It'll do all of those things. What are my thoughts on developer productivity like pieces.app? Have you used workflow productivity tools like this before? Don't know what it is. I'm not going to go to it because that would be free advertisement. But I will talk about Trello because I use Trello. So for me, like the developer productivity, I guess like is like project management, I guess, in a way. So like, yeah, using something to manage projects like Trello, that's what I've used before. In terms of like the apps I use on my laptop, I don't know. I've got, I don't know. I appreciate that. Walt smacked man. Thank you for the comment. So yeah, I don't have any advice on productivity. Just try to do everything as best as you can. And if you feel like you're doing something that isn't as best as you can, look into something that will make the thing you're doing better than what you're doing. That's my advice on productivity. No, I'm over Notion too. Like everyone was like, "Oh, you should use Notion." I tried. I guess these are like YouTube videos and stuff I was gonna work on. I just prefer Trello. Like Trello is really good at project boards. Notion is good at a bunch of other things and like allows you to use project boards, but some of the simplest things I could do in Trello, I haven't figured out how to do in Notion yet. And so that's my other piece of advice is don't spend all your time learning tools because you're just gonna waste your time learning those tools when you could have just gotten it done the original way or like some other way. Obviously tools are good, right? Like some things are worth learning, but these days the things that I already use work for what I'm doing, so I haven't found the need to look into other things. Yeah. But yeah, I would say like use tools to an extent, but don't use tools just to use tools. Use tools because they're useful and they provide value and they save you time and all of that. All right. What would I recommend to include in your portfolio? You should include projects that showcase the type of development that you want to do, right? So if you really like working on animations and like completely custom UIs and stuff like that, you should have a project in your portfolio that demonstrates that, right? You should have an app that has cool animations. You should potentially write a design system from scratch and like have that in your portfolio, those kinds of things. But if you're, let's say you're a backend developer and you want to find a job building APIs and working with databases, your portfolio should have like a really well written API, right? It should be documented, it should be tested, potentially it should integrate something like continuous deployment, different things like that. So my advice is to put things in your portfolio that showcase the kind of work that you want to do. And what's up, Laura? Welcome in. Which is different advice for everybody because everybody wants to potentially get a different kind of dev job. I talked about this earlier, but I would say don't try not to include like to-do apps or tutorial projects. Like the things in your portfolio should showcase the work that you've done, not the work that you've copied from other people. Now that said, you can take something that you learned in a tutorial and rework it to be your own app. And I think that can be included in your portfolio because you're basically showing that you know how to take a thing and modify it for your own needs. So yeah. Is the portfolio needed in development? So I also talked about this earlier. You really only need a portfolio if you don't have prior work experience or you don't have like a computer science degree. Because a portfolio is basically how you convince and convey to an employer that you know what you're doing. You have experience with this without having had a job before. So yeah, but yeah, that's my advice for a portfolio. Put things in it that showcase what you do well and what you want to get hired for. Yeah. Yeah. And then yeah, I think that's a good point, Crafty Becky, because as far as I know, Front End Mentor, they have like descriptions of projects, but they don't give you the code. They just describe this is the thing that you should implement, and then it's really up to you to implement. And I think that's a good way to go about it as well, because if multiple people have this link sharing app in their portfolio, each one of them implemented it in their own way, and so it's going to be unique to their portfolio, which is totally fine. All right. Not right now. I am Slim. But tune in tomorrow because it'll probably be way less busy because I'm going live tomorrow night. But we're wrapping up. We got 4 minutes left. I'm just trying to answer as many as I can before we go. Any documentation on integrating AWS Cognito with a website? I will need the website to edit tables using GraphQL. I have no idea. I haven't used Cognito myself. I only helped someone that was using Cognito. But I guess it also depends what kind of backend you have. So is it a Next.js backend? Is it an Express backend? Is it like a serverless backend? I will figure it out. So yeah, your searches for the web should be more specific to like what kind of backend you have that you're trying to integrate. Trying to break through for my first grad job. I would love to get a React job because that's what I'm most competent with. But most React jobs aren't entry level. Any advice? If a job says that it requires 2 to 3 years of experience, you should apply anyways. Because a lot of times it is a wish list. Now, you shouldn't lie and say that you have 2 to 3 years of experience. You should be honest about that. But if you at least get past the resume phase and like you're at least talking to people at that company, at that point they might just like you as a person. So my advice is apply to everything, even if it says you need multiple years of experience. But with that said, you should have really, and you want a job in React, you should have really good React projects in your portfolio that show that you are competent with React. Yeah, that's the best advice I got is apply anyways. Put the best stuff you can in your portfolio. Um, and you may apply to jobs that don't necessarily list React, right? You can find an entry level or junior web development job, maybe where you're not working with React, but at least you can now get some experience, and then eventually you might go find a job where you work in React. Or if you get a job at that company, you can maybe convince them eventually to like use React or something like that. But that would be my advice. So yeah, hopefully that helps. Okay. Um, what are some real life examples with proxies like Vue does in its reactivity system? The thing about proxies is like they typically are really for libraries. And specifically, we're talking about proxies in JavaScript. And it makes the most sense for libraries to implement proxies because it makes it so that the consumer of the library doesn't have to do things as manually. Like, I don't know if that's the correct English, but basically, so a proxy lets you have an object, and then you can have like an interceptor. So you can put that object into a proxy, and then you can have functions that get called and like intercept whenever a property is getting retrieved or a property is getting set. You can do custom things there. So it honestly makes the most sense to do that inside of a library. So something like MobX, which is state management for React, internally they use proxies. And like for Vue, their state management system, they use proxies. And both of those things use proxies so that the end user of the library can write very simple code to update the state. They don't have to know about or add a bunch of event handlers and stuff like that. They can just write some very simple code that behind the scenes is doing more complex things. So yeah, I can't think of an example of where I would write my own proxy in a code base. But quick plug from myself. A long time ago, I wrote a hello friends, welcome to Coding Garden. Oh, I was like, where's that sound coming from? I did a meetup talk. This one, where I wrote a framework from scratch, like all in the span of like 20 minutes or so. And we used a proxy because we wanted to automatically have Vue updates based on state changes. So I'm about to leave. Go watch that video to keep yourself entertained. All right. How can I make myself do the finishing touches in side projects and finally publish them? I don't know. I don't know if I have good advice for this. I think ultimately, like, if you want it to be part of your portfolio or something like that, you want to make sure that you have a good README. You want to make sure that it's deployed, and then like, yeah. And I think that's good advice from Lil Sheep is like, just make sure you don't overdo the projects, right? So if you keep the scope small enough, then you can finish them more easily, right? So yeah, like don't bite off more than you can chew, I guess is good advice. I don't know. Or like Saint Lolek is saying, just do it. Just do it. And we'll look at this from Sej. Have I seen this report on the NPM vulnerability? The massive bug at the heart of the NPM ecosystem. Oh. Okay. In my short read of the TLDR, yes, this seems like an issue. This seems like someone could publish a malicious package where the manifest is different from the contents, and there's no way to know unless you actually do an npm install. Yeah, so bad actors can hide malware and scripts indirect or transitive dependencies that go undetected. So yeah, it's an issue, and it probably is already happening a lot. And also, I like this image. It's like a glitched out npm. There's Bun, there's Dino, there's Socket.io, GitHub, Snick. This is cool. That's a cool image. So yeah, it's a problem. I'll have to read more about it later, though. All right. Alex says, what do you do when you feel inspired and you don't know what to program? Well, typically, if I feel inspired, I'm inspired to do a specific thing. So I don't know if I can relate to that. But again, it goes back to the other advice. Just do it. Just like whatever you're inspired for, just start making it happen. All right, last question, and then we're gonna get out of here. For someone's brain that doesn't work well with documentation and better with video, what are suggestions for learning with text-only documentation? Practice. I think the potential issue is it maybe feels like video is better because of the way that it's presented. Like and honestly, like I want to do a whole YouTube video about this. How, well, hello friends. Welcome I keep popping up. I will preface this with Fireship is awesome and extremely entertaining and deserves all 2 million of the subscribers that they have. That said, Fireship's videos they're like a trap. You watch them, you feel like you learned something, but really you just got exposure. And like exposure and learning and practice are two very different things. But pretty often honestly with a lot of video and YouTube content, you fall into this trap of like seeing the person in the video do the thing and like it makes sense. And the reason it makes sense is because they've planned it, right? They've laid it all out to be in a very specific way that will make sense to the viewer of the video. And like that's the goal of creating content that people want to watch, is it makes sense. And I think this is the other thing that that happened a lot whenever I was an instructor at a coding school. The way that I liked to teach was with live coding. And I mean, I mean, I haven't really written much code today, but typically I like to teach with code, in that I'm showing the examples in real time so you can actually see what I'm talking about. I'm not just like pointing to code on a slide. But the issue with that, not the issue, the thing that you could potentially take away from it watching that lesson is because you watched me do the thing and build the thing, and because it made sense when I was doing it, it feels almost like, oh yeah, I can go home and do that. But the issue is when you go home to try and do it on your own and you don't have the instructor up there doing the exact things, there's so many things that you potentially missed that like you didn't see the instructor do, or that like weren't mentioned, that you have to actually learn yourself and like figure out yourself. And so what point am I trying to make here? Sometimes video feels like it makes more sense, but that's just because of the way that it's laid out. So I think my advice is, and it will take some practice, but I think ultimately, like if you do not get good at reading through documentation, and also like there are certain skills you can acquire that make it easier to work well with text documentation, which is things like skimming the documentation, searching for specific keywords. Like I don't ever read all of the documentation, right? So like, yeah, no, exactly, Tyrell. And I think that's kind of what I'm getting at right now. It's like documentation typically tells you these are all of the things that are available, but it doesn't assemble them into an app for you, right? Like it doesn't tell you like, well, do this, do this, do this, and then you're done. Some documentation does, but that's more of like the tutorial or getting started section of the docs. The docs that literally just list the things that are available to you don't have structure, because it's ultimately like Lego pieces. Like here are all the pieces and it's up to you to assemble them. So yeah, I get that can be tricky, but I think it just comes with practice. I have been reading documentation for so long and I've done it so much that at this point it's a lot easier for me to be, I guess I'll just use Supabase as an example because it's on the mind. It's a lot easier for me to be just like dropped into a bunch of documentation and then try to figure out the right things that I need. And then I would also say like, don't discount search. Like you should absolutely use the search feature to find the specific things that you need. And I think that's I think the other thing, Tyrell, that you can try to work on is breaking things down into the small problems that need to be solved, because that's basically how you're going to take the documentation and apply it to the problem that you're trying to solve, right? Because like with the tutorial, they've already figured all of that out. They know what they want to do, they know what order they're going to do it in, and they know the pieces of the docs they need to show you in order to do that. But the person that wrote that video tutorial had to figure that out. And before they did that, they had to break down their problem into, all right, I know this is what I need to do here. This is a small section of what I need to do here. And this is what I need to do here. Now, how do I do that? You figure it out like one step at a time. And each one of those things was probably sourced from like a small section of the docs. So yeah, honestly, I think my advice is just read more docs. Like I know it's not the advice you want to hear, but I do think it is a skill that you can learn, that obviously, like, I mean, the way you mention it here is like for someone's brain that doesn't work well with documentation. I completely understand that there are some people that it's really hard to take in like large blocks of text and stuff like that. But my advice is get used to it, because that's really the only way that you're going to get past it. And really, any people that are creating, like basically Fireship, I keep using him as an example, but they essentially take the docs and boil it down to 2 minutes and 20 seconds. Like that's the skill that they've gotten really good at. But that means that they had to get really good at reading the docs and really good at like basically take what the docs are saying and making it into like an applicable example. So yeah, hopefully that helps, Tyrell. And I feel like it's the advice you don't want to hear, but my advice is you just gotta power through it. You have to read the docs, break things down, search the docs. Yeah, hopefully that helps. Yeah, and the more you do it, the easier it'll get. Absolutely. Okay. Yeah, plus, yeah, and I'm not discounting the entertainment factor. Like, he's good at memes, he's good at making jokes. But I think, what's up, Alka? I mean, I want to do a whole video essay on this, because, like, it is a trap that a lot of people fall into. Like, they think they're learning, when in reality, they were just exposed to a thing. If they were to turn that video off and just try to go apply it immediately, you probably aren't going to be able to do that. You're still going to need the docs. You're still going to need more information and more practice to actually say that you learned a thing. That's been my advice a lot today, is just do it. But I feel like sometimes that's what people need to hear. All right. Let's end the stream with a tutorial on Svelte. Welcome to my TED Talk. All right, we're going to go into focus mode, and I'm going to teach you Svelte in... we're going to do Svelte in 6.5 minutes. Wait, does Vite have a Svelte starter? They do. We're going to use the... Perfect, I needed this. Honestly, I don't even need to generate an app. I can just use their tutorial. All right, but let's do it. Svelte in 6.5 minutes. Here we go. So Svelte is a front-end framework. It's absolutely comparable to React, which is also a front-end library for building web apps. It's comparable to Angular, which lets you build front-end web apps. It's comparable to Vue. All of these things are JavaScript libraries and frameworks that allow you to build web applications. And that's what you can do with Svelte. So any of the things you can do with these things, you can also do with Svelte. That is what Svelte is. Now, the underlying mechanisms for how it achieves that are very different from React, Angular, and Vue. So both React and Vue use a thing called a virtual DOM in order to determine what to update on your page. And I actually don't know much about it. I think maybe Angular uses a virtual DOM. But the cool thing about Svelte is instead of doing a virtual DOM, it actually, the code you write gets turned into vanilla JavaScript. The code you write gets turned into, I didn't even start my timer. We'll go down to 5 minutes. The code you write at the end of the day just gets turned into the most performant vanilla JS code that it can be. So let's just look at the examples of these Svelte apps. And I'll show you what you can do. So for example, you have a file called app.svelte. This is a component. That's the other thing about Svelte is it does component-based development. So with like React, Vue, Angular, all of these have adopted this idea of components where you essentially break down your user interface into small little components and then you write the code for those. So for example, if we look at reddit.com and we try to break this down into components, you could have, let's say like the nav bar component. So you could have code that only manages that one nav bar. Each one of these is probably like a trending card component, right? And they all have a lot of things in common. They have a background image, they have a title, they have some description, they have like a link. But you can wrap that up into a component called UI card or trending card. Each one of these is like an individual post. You could put that into a component. So modern web development breaks everything down into components. And so this one thing right here is a component. And you have a section called script. That's where all of your interactive code goes. And then everything below that is your template. And that's what actually gets rendered on the page. So you can see here, this is a non-interactive example because it's literally just you have a variable and then you render it out on the page. The Svelte examples here will actually show you the exact JavaScript output. And so basically, and really this is the whole, if you're newer to modern web development, this is the idea. You write code that looks fairly simple like this, but then at the end of the day, in order to get it running inside of a web browser, it needs to get turned into actual JavaScript. And so at the end of the day, this is the code that gets spit out by the Svelte compiler, which you actually don't even need to look at, and you don't even need to know what it does. Just know that you write this code, this happens. Okay, so there are some other things you might want to do, reactive assignment. So this is where some like state management comes into play. So let's say you have a page that has a button and you want to click that button and some number goes up every time you click the button. Well, in Svelte, you can do that like this. So define your variable that has the initial value, have a function that modifies that variable, and then call that function when the button is clicked on. And then inside the button, we can always look at the latest value of count. And then here there's some custom logic that like does pluralization based on what the current count is. So this is an example of a more interactive bit of code. But if you were to think about like how you would do this in vanilla JS, basically when the button is clicked, you would need to manually write the code that says like grab that element, set its text content to be this value. The code would be a lot more manual. Whereas Svelte lets you write things in a very declarative way. So like you basically set up your state, you set up your functions, you set up your UI, and then everything just flows from there. You might also want to do something like conditional rendering, and that goes like this. So let's say I have some state, which is an object that has a logged in property, and then I have a function that can change that logged in property to true or false. And so if the user is logged in, the button should say log out so that they can log out. And if the user is not logged in, then the button should say log in. So right now, this if block is running and this button is getting rendered. But when I click this function runs, it changes the state, and now this little piece gets rendered right there. So there's conditional rendering. You would also have each blocks. So this lets you iterate over data. So like, let's say you have a list and you want to show all of those things on the page. They have this each directive. You can specify the list you want to iterate over, and then pull off the properties of each of the thing in that list. And so for every cat in the cats list, we're going to have a list item that shows the current index and the name. Yeah. And then we've already seen an example of DOM events, but basically any DOM event you want to tap into exists on an element. So there's things like mouse move, on click, all of that stuff. Yeah, and that's the other nice thing about Svelte is because it doesn't use a virtual DOM, it doesn't need keys. So the keys concept comes from React and the virtual DOM, and then any other framework that implemented the virtual DOM does a similar thing. But the keys are specifically for the virtual DOM to keep track of which element in that list got updated or changed. But in this case, because there is no virtual DOM, we don't actually need keys. I think you can have keys though. And see what the difference is. Yeah, I think we lose our styling if we don't have the keys. So that's it. That's time's up. That's it. That's what Svelte is. I think. Never mind. If the list changes, right? So if things are getting added or removed from the list, then you do need keys. Cool. But yeah, that's Svelte. It makes it really easy. And there are other things I didn't mention, like styles. So by default, styles in Svelte are scoped to the component. So if you put this little style tag here, any styles you define in here are only ever going to apply inside of this component. So I didn't show like multiple components, but you would have an app that would have multiple components. And a lot of times you don't want those styles to leak out because you're styling that one specific component. You get that by default. So basically any styles defined in here only apply here and they don't leak out of the component. And you just get that for free. You don't have to do anything special for that. But yeah, that's Svelte in 7 minutes. Okay, I'm gonna get out of here. Thank you everybody for hanging out. This was fun. Please go watch my latest YouTube video. I would appreciate it if you did. And also like it, subscribe over there on YouTube. Drop a follow here if you haven't yet. But yeah, this is not using the Shadow DOM. It uses a mechanism that basically gives unique names to the styles that you're defining automatically. Yeah, you can check out Component Party. They basically have a bunch of front-end frameworks listed and then allow you to compare between them. That's a thing for sure. Yeah. Wait. They are basically like phishing developers. Is that what's happening, I am Ruse? Like they give you a test assignment, but and it's like they were never going to hire you to begin with. They just wanted you to run their script. Is that what you're saying? That's unfortunate. That's bad, but it's also very interesting. But yeah, follow me over on YouTube. I have a mailing list. If you're gonna follow me anywhere, please follow me on the mailing list. It's how I can stay in touch with you, regardless of platform. I send go live notifications there. I send a weekly update. Check that out. What's up, Codex? Actually, I'll do one last thing. So I don't know if you saw my recent video, Codex, but I actually did answer your question from Twitter. I just didn't include it in the video because it made the video too long. So I'm gonna end with this, and then we're gonna go on a raid. But get ready to raid. Go find the raid messages. We're gonna raid right after I play this. After I play this clip. Next question's from Codex, and it says, "Do you have any essential?" For the question, Fuller. Next question's from Codex, and it says, "Do you have any essential gear?" And first up, really good tent pegs. So if you buy a tent, it comes with these pegs, and typically they're like not very strong. And if you try to hammer them in, especially if it's like really hard ground, they'll bend, or it'll be really hard to get them into the ground. So I have many really sturdy, long tent stakes, and I also bring a mallet with me, so I can hammer a stake into anything. I can tie down tarps, I can tie down my tent, and I don't have to worry about the stakes like bending or whatever. So to me, that's essential. Like especially if you're trying to put up a tarp really quick because it's about to rain or something like that, having those kinds of pegs and a hammer is like essential. The other essential piece, which I already mentioned, was a cot for me. So if you're doing car camping, you have the room to potentially, depending on how many people are going and what you're bringing, you potentially have the room to pack a cot or like an air mattress or a large comfy cushion or something like that. To me, that's essential because if I get a good night's sleep, I'm having a good time camping. So the other essential piece is the clothes that you wear. So depending on if it's hot or if it's cold, synthetic fabrics dry really quickly. So if you sweat, they're moisture wicking, it'll dry quickly. The last thing you want is wearing cotton and then you get sweaty and your clothes is just wet all the time. So the other essential is just make sure that you have some synthetic fabric. So like 90% polyester. I have like a polyester cotton blend that's really nice. It dries very quickly. But basically, if you're in the outdoors, you possibly will get wet either from your own sweat or water from the sky or from a lake. And you want to be able to dry very quickly. And then the other thing is I wear wool socks. I actually wear wool socks in the summer, but they sell like lightweight wool socks, but wool is also moisture wicking, so your feet can also stay comfortable. And I guess while I'm talking about clothes, a good pair of hiking shoes. Right now I have these trail running shoes. They're kind of like all-purpose, meaning you can run in them, you can hike in them. There's probably a limit to what you can hike to in these kinds of shoes, but like if you're just doing like car camping and there's a couple of trails near where you're camping, these are probably more than enough to make sure that you have enough grip and also your feet can stay comfortable if you're walking a lot. This next question comes from Jacques, who... So yeah, the video was originally 30 minutes long, like 28 minutes long. And I was like, I have to cut this down to like under 20 minutes. So your question got cut, Codex. Sorry about that. All right, let's go on a raid. And also take a look at the schedule. So I'll be live tomorrow night. If you go to this website, you can see the schedule in your time zone. Hopefully. You have wool inserts for your shoes. I've never heard of that. Yeah, so if you go to this site, I'll be live tomorrow at this time. It'll be in your time zone if you go to this site. Okay, let's go on a raid. Thanks everyone for the questions today. I appreciate you all. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for being kind. And wherever you are in the world, have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, or night. Until next time, here's this.